Hey everybody, welcome to Hash Church 2.0, the past, present, and future of vaporization. Today we're going to do a little vaporization dialogue. I got some good folks that I'm going to invite in, and I guess I should get them in right away with the email. Unfortunately, my friend Kevin from Team Steam Jamaica is having a hard time getting in on his phone, but I'm hoping that Gary from UpTech and Linus Vaporbrothers and Steve from 7th Floor and Sabo from VapeXhale will all be able to come in and we'll all be able to have a little bit of a conversation. I did also send out an invitation to Everett from Verdamper, to Jurgen from Volcano, and as well as Task Rock from Highly Educated. So I guess I wanted to start out before everyone comes in. I have sent out that email. I wanted to send my regards to the family of Dennis Perron and all the people that he supported over the years. For those of you that don't know, Dennis was a huge cannabis advocate, just passed away at 72, legendary cannabis activist who kindled America's medical marijuana revolution in the 1980s. There's a great article on Leafly about his passing and a little bit about what he done. So we wanted to shout him out, and John Entwistle, his husband. Sorry for your loss, and yeah, we appreciate all the amazing work that you did, Dennis. It was the real deal, for sure. California and the rest of the world will not soon be forgetting Dennis Perron. Hey, welcome, Mr. McCoy.
How's it going, bro?
It's going great, dude. Look at you.
Sorry, I just missed the Perron tribute, but
yeah, I had to shout out Dennis.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I had to shout out Dennis. I'm sure you've got your stories as well. Mark Mckoy from Vriptech, old-time friend. Geez, we go back a good solid close to 20 years, don't we?
We do.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And we got Gary in the room who just showed up from UpTech and W9. He is the creator of the Omnicron and the Hercules pen, as well as the Bubbleman Trinity pen. So welcome to you, Gary.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you perfect.
Perfect. There we go.
Yes. Excellent. Right. I'm looking forward to the dialogue today, boys. I think actually, between the two of you right now, you might be two of the people that take this shit the most serious when it comes to the love of vaporization and sort of the ability to not lower your integrity to acquire the thing that might be easier rather than fight through those obstacles with the high integrity. Anyone with high integrity knows you just come up with more obstacles when you can't lower your integrity to make it work. You guys know what I'm saying?
I hope I can explain this correctly. In order to actually get something of high integrity, you have to go up against the wave. Right. Wave is where the low integrity is. If you're going up against the wave, you're doing something different. You're doing something, how do I put this? You're doing something that is a lot different than what everybody else is doing. And if you're a lot different than what everybody else is doing, you're actually being seen. Hopefully, people take notice of that. But at the same time, you're getting drowned as well. So you have to look into that.
Yeah, it's there's a whole situation of well, David Suzuki put it beautifully when he told me about his show. And he was like, when I got the Nature of Things show, I really thought that I was going to be this gem on television. And then I quickly realized when you get tossed into a cesspool, even if you are a diamond, you quickly take on the appearance of what is in the cesspool. So I was like, that's a really good metaphor, dude.
Yeah, because you tie yourself next to a dog, you're gonna learn how to be a dog one day. It's basically the same thing. You take on the appearance of wherever you are at. Just like a person having the same accent if they live in the South for a long time or in Europe for a long time, it's just the same thing.
Yep, absolutely. Someone's laughing that I brought up David Suzuki. Hey, man, David Suzuki was awesome in his time. The Nature of Things, that show was wicked. I think that it shined through. I think that it was not just taking on the appearance of the cesspool. But hey, welcome to Sabo from VapeXhale, who just made it in with the beautiful rainbow-colored wall behind him.
Hey, what's up, guys? Mark.
What's up, Sabo?
Good to see you.
Bless up, brethren.
Bless up.
Yeah. Is that who we got coming in now? That's Linus.
Linus, Vaporbrothers.
Hey, welcome, Linus. Welcome, Vapor Bros. Look at this, man. You guys are all representing.
Creators.
Amazing. Yeah, dude. Yeah, we got a good little group here. I don't know how many more we're gonna have. I did invite my friend Kevin from Steam Team Jamaica. I thought it would be kind of a fun thing to have the almost, not the original, as McCoy reminded me the other day, of the Scythians, which I'll probably start in a few minutes, and I'll go through a small history of vaporization. And this is just an article I found online that I figured I would read to everyone. Once I read the history of vaporization, anyone in the room that wants to sort of toss in their history and where they fit in, or if they feel that something's a little bit different, it's not the word of God. This is just an article that I found online that I thought had a nice kind of little history that I fit into pretty well, because I was in Amsterdam in 1994, 95 when Eagle Bill was there with his vaporizer, and I met Mark Mckoy at a fairly early on in the game. And so I've met the Volcano people the year they released the Volcano at the Cannabusiness in Germany. I met Jürgen and his daughter. So I have a fairly my own version of the history of vaporization. So why don't I go right to that? I have it open here. I'll probably share it on the page as well so people can see what I'm reading. And this will be quick. And then once we do this, what we'll do is we'll go through and each of you can introduce yourself and sort of talk about, your passions of cannabis and how it led into vaporization. And here, I'm going to just keep your mic muted, Gary. If you guys notice, I'll probably mute your mics when they're unmuted. That way, if you go to talk again, just remember you got to unmute your mic, because often we get some sort of feedback noise here. All right, so let me change the screensaver to show everyone what this is going on here. Yeah, application window. There we go. The history of vaping. So this is from Herb. And I believe it was the gentleman Herb who wrote it. It's a couple years old now. So the history of vaporization, herbs for inhalation, is a practice that can be traced far back and across many different civilizations. So the history of vaporization, herbs for insulation. Oh, we got that. What exactly is vaporizing or vaping? All right. So if you've been living under a rock and aren't sure what vaping is, here's an explanation. The basic technique since the inception of vaping, either old or the new age battery-supported vaporizers, is the same. Vaporizing heats the ingredients to an optimum heat. The optimal temperature range from cannabis is between 180 and 210 Celsius for the perfect vape, compared to joints, bongs, or a pipe that burns the ingredients. The blends, whether they be oils, wax, or dry herbs, are heated to a level allowing the release of the materials, but allow the temperature that would burn them. As there is no combustion during the process of heating, a vapor is released that is quite cool and non-irritating to the user's throat. Yeah, unless you hit like 17 Volcano bags in a row without drinking tea, and then you quickly realize how dry it really is. 15th, what do we got here? Sorry, the 5th century BC. So this is the one Mark was talking about the other day. Vaporizing to humans has been known to date back in Egypt. From the book, The History of Herodotus, 1928, Dial Press. During the 5th century BC, Herodotus, who is often called the father of history, recorded his accounts of the ancient practice enjoyed by Scythians. The Scythians take some of this hemp seed and throw it upon the red-hot stones. Immediately it vaporizes and gives out such a vapor as no Grecian vapor bath can exceed. The Scythian, delighted, shout for joy. The steady heat from the baking stones would produce a pleasant-smelling vapor. So 1,500 years ago, Afghanistan. Technically speaking, the first real vaporizer was invented by Irfan Sheikh of the Mughals, present-day Afghanistan. Safavid dynasty knows to us as hookah, or as water pipe, nargil, argala, kailan, shisha. About 1,400 years ago, Mughals, then rulers of India, introduced hookah to India, which was then more used to a chillum. The controversy over the invention. There is quite a big controversy over the invention of the first vaporizer. Here's a patent from 1927 USA. The first one who came up with the idea of the electronic cigarette is Joseph Robinson. He did it in 1927, in which he filed a patent to the USPTO for the first mechanical butane ignition vaporizer. Robinson's patent was approved and published by the USPTO. Little to his credit that he deserves, he still owns the patent of the first nicotine vaporizer. And so that one's from 1960, was the dawn of the modern-day inventor of e-cigarette. Korean veteran Herbert A. Gilbert, the modern-day vaporizers, until this day are claimed to be built on the blueprint of Mr. Gilbert's original design. Mr. Gilbert, to this date, works for the Emperor e-cigarettes who bought his technology. 1990 to 1994, Amsterdam. Father of cannabis vaporizer Eagle Bill has a cannabis community cult following known to discover the popularizing of the cannabis vaporizer. He termed his device safe and effective alternative to smoking. For over a decade, he was a favorite exhibit at the Sensi Seedbank's Hash Museum in Amsterdam. That's definitely where I met him, as well as at the PAX Party House, and as well as at Lucky Mother's in both 94, 95. The museum attracts visitors from around the world, and Bill enjoyed sharing his new technologies to any willing inhalers. A resident of Amsterdam for 12 years, this was soon before the 1994 Cannabis Cup, Sensi Seeds gave Bill space, and he blew away the crowd with his new technology. Truly, if anyone was at the early Cannabis Cups, it was really, really hard to miss Eagle Bill. The guy was an incredible energy and an incredible advocate for vaporization. It remained the most popular exhibit at the Cannabis Cup for 10 years, earning Bill and Sensi Seeds numerous first-place cups. Soon he set up shop on a daily basis in the Hash Museum and used that platform to turn the world on to vaporization. Eagle Bill was introduced to vaporizing in 1993 by a California grower who used a heat gun to vaporize aromatic blends. Just in case you didn't know, everything in the cannabis industry always started with a California grower. I'm just going to say that now, whether it's water hash, whether it's like, it's just everything came from a California. You follow the history back, it's always the unknown California grower. It's amazing, really.
We made everything, man. We made everything. What can I say?
I'm not going to deny it, bro. So in an effort to design a more affordable means of vaporizing, we're simultaneously raising public awareness. Eagle Bill invented the shake and vape. Based on the very same ancient Egyptian methods, Eagle Bill's glass pipe vaporizer that heated the bottom of a glass bowl with instead lighting the cannabis itself. Pioneered by a Native American, the shake and vape was nicknamed the peace pipe of the future. Eagle's Bill invention would be the catalyst for rapid technology and product developments in the vaporizer industry, and a big inspiration. Bill passed away on 22nd of May, 2005 in Georgia, USA. In 1994, BC Vaporizer, Canada claims to have invented the first electrically charged vaporizer inspired on Bill's Amato design. BC Vaporizer still is running in business today and are inventors of solar-powered charged vaporizer. It was, however, Storrs & Bickel Company in 2000 that invented the new era of desktop vaporizers and named it Volcano, just like its work around. The history of vaporizers, as controversial as it sounds, still holds the timeline benchmark and technically makes hookah the oldest vaporizer. Modern-day vaporizers credit, no doubt, goes to everyone involved in the process, but still credited to late Bill Amato for his pioneering endeavor to the cannabis world. So that was a little article written by Herb. I know that everyone's not present, and that really kind of stops in 2000, where it really sort of picks up steam and all of these different companies started to come into play. But kind of a neat little timeline. If any of you guys have anything you want to fix on that timeline, by all means, add it. I can imagine maybe Mark McCoy has something to say. I don't know.
I thought that was pretty well done. I mean, there was a number of different iterations that came off the Eagle Bill, including myself, very much so inspired by what Eagle was doing with the heat gun, and kind of got keyed in by Doug Mignola, an old childhood friend of mine from Foster City that also ended up in Amsterdam. And for me, just coming from that one-hit snap-through school of water pipe smoking, West Coast style, where if you overpacked the bowl and you couldn't snap it through yourself and enjoy the freshie, well, you were punished by snapping through that ashy, so you packed a freshie for your bro. And I just was looking to emulate that same sort of ritual and philosophy with vapor when I took the heat guns and developed the chamber bowl concept. Additionally, just a big fan of the water pipe and the moisture conditioning component. I think it's important to note that, especially with cannabis, the heat and the dryness is really what does the damage. So hot and dry vapor will still dry your throat out and irritate it. And in fact, I remember a long afternoon pulling off that volcano with you in BC and waking up the next morning realizing, man, we should have ran that through the water pipe a little bit more than we did.
Absolutely, yeah. That's going back for sure. That must be 2001 or 2002 that you're talking about right now. We definitely have been at it for a while now. Mark was one of the first people to show me, I guess, simultaneously between Mark and Everett from the Verdamper.
Yeah.
Who I also invited onto the show today. I'm not sure if he got the message. It went through his website and they weren't checking emails for 48 hours and I sent it a little bit late, but he would have been also great to have on the conversation. The first time I ever hit the Verdamper, I think it was at Soma's place. Although maybe they also had one at Lucky Mother's when with instead of the heat gun, the strange little sort of element that Everett made. But yeah, between Mark and Everett back then, this is, you know, early 2000s. I guess what I had seen Eagle Bill, and Eagle was hitting out of this huge giant. So it was very hard to get the vapor super, super concentrated. And so from the connoisseur, from the hardcore, like chronic, you know, we were always looking like, oh, this volcano's really cool. If only we could make it so 100 bags were in one bag. That was always kind of like the mentality, like, how can we get this concentrated to the point where I'm actually, you know, because obviously it was a beautiful thing to be able to hit the vapor and have it just the taste of it and the smoothness of it and the subtle nuances of it. It was very, very different for anyone that ever went from straight burning joints. 90s, we were all just burning joints, and then all of a sudden someone was trying to show you, oh, you can vaporize it. It was right up there with putting water and ice and pot in a bag and trying to tell people, don't worry, we're not going to ruin this. We're just making hash right now. They were like, what? Like people throwing that herb away, like big bags of the vaped herb. It's like, yeah, we're done with this. And people were like, no, I could sell that. It's like, listen, you don't want to sell that. That is pretty much the worst thing that you could possibly do. What about Vaporbrothers? When did you guys come online, Linus? Oh, you're muted, and you're muted right now. I muted your mic, and you want to be as close to your mic as possible because when you turn away a little bit, the mic is cutting out slightly. So as long as you're close, your voice will pick up real nice. So yeah, when did Vaporbrothers come along? Still muted. I'm going to unmute. There's usually a little button. Oh, there you go. You got it. Oh, you muted again. Hit that one more time and wait for the delay. There you go.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks. Well, at about 98, winter of 98, we were really doing it. Can you hear me at the moment?
We can hear you perfect.
My history was a lot of going to college and a lot of trying to cut down, a lot of trying to help friends cut down on smoking. And so I was making very tiny pipes with very small bowls. And it was also trying to stretch supply because in 90s LA, it wasn't, you know, super easy to get good weed. So trying to smoke these tiny bowls, suddenly I realized that I got way more effect for way longer using less. And I was doing that at the same time as my friend was investigating vaporizers because the BC vaporizer was out, and there were handhelds. One was called an eTerra, and we had just discovered Vriptech. Maybe a year later, we discovered, and we actually talked to Mark. We ran into him in Malibu once. Got a great lecture. He has a lot of info to give, but what we hated about the vaporizers that we had was that vapor went into a glass bowl and it got stale there. And when you went to take your hit, the vapor just went around in circles. And we really wanted to make something that created the vapor and put it into you right away. My friend was tinkering. He took apart some parts. He put them back together with like a nugget floated in a piece of pipe that we connected to a heating iron. And he got a hit, and I recognized, because I was in physics classes and stuff at the time, that he was drawing hot air out of a heating element and through the herb. And we realized very quickly that the best way to vaporize was pure convection. Basically, heat air and pass it through herb. Don't touch the herb to hot metal or anything. And basically that's what Mark Mckoy was doing on a large scale, big diameter, big airflow. And what this eTerra vaporizer, little handheld vaporizer, was doing, but it would burn your lips and stuff. We came up with, basically, here's the diameter that we ended up with, which is about 11 millimeters on the inside. And that was the perfect bowl for me, little big, little small for others, but it ended up being like our standard. And what we think we came up with was the good, sharp, strong, moist hit from the smallest amount of herbs, but still big enough for a few people. And this thing would get people too high, which basically, once my co-inventor called me and said that he was in the fetal position, I was like, wow, we're on to something. We need to do something with this. That's important because the world was smoking and we needed to impress smokers. And just like, you know, trying to get onto vegetarian food or something, when you try it and you really just want a burger afterwards because maybe you ate something that was not heavy enough, once you can get this heavy enough and get this strong, sharp, thick vapor, you think you can go back to smoking and you can't because you're affected. And of course the effect was longer. It was great because, like, if it wears off, you can vaporize more and you get right back up again. Whereas smoking is more like coffee to me, like it goes way high and then crashes, and you smoke more, you get more sober. You know, what's up with that? But yeah, that was our start. I mean, I can talk forever about this, but basically where we think we came in was, well, quiet, small, could be in your house. This one's beautifully painted, but the main model, well, I'll bring one out a little later, is a wooden box. This is painted by my girlfriend Lindsay's Heartwork. She's doing a project with visionary artists on our vaporizers. But basically just connecting and drawing a big breath of fresh air. But yeah, I could go into it forever because we got really micro with, you know, what we were doing. What we thought we had to do was popularize the notion of vaporizing, though, because it was really unheard of. And before Volcano came out and went on 60 Minutes, it was totally unheard of. And we were trying to convince people, once you get 3 hits into them, they're proselytized. They proselytize others. They're in the religion almost. So we spread kind of exponentially, and eventually we tried to just become the most common vaporizer in the world. Through our knockoffs, we got knocked off immediately over and over again. Some were improvements, most were just cheapenings. This angled wooden box that I drew one night on an all-nighter.
Hey, Linus, your knockoffs have knockoffs of knockoffs. You know that, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's how it is now. I mean, that is crazy now.
Highest form of flattery, Linus. Highest form of flattery.
Great analogy too with the vegetarian and just the few things that you said there. I also have to mention the BC Vaporizer because I'm sure nobody wants to throw that thing under the bus, but I'll do it. It was pretty much the worst vaporizer on the planet, yet it was like the one that sold so many back in the day. Like, I know the guy who invented it, he sold thousands of them. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of those vaporizers were sold. And they were the ones with the little pan and the dome. And you know what? We got to give them their place because they almost popularized the notion of vaporizing without really vaporizing. And I'll give them another props because it was Shona Banda who was basically wasting away from Crohn's disease, getting arrested in the Midwest, having her threats of her child taken. And when she came on Hash Church, and she talked about the oil that she was using to help save her life from Crohn's. She wasn't doing MZT. She wasn't doing coconut oil. She wasn't doing Rick Simpson's. She wasn't doing any of these oils or bubble hashes or anything. What she was doing was she was collecting the condensed cannabinoids and terpene profiles from inside one of those dome vaporizers. And she was collecting that oil, and that oil damn near saved her life, if not did save her life. So once again, it's always easy to judge things. It's always easy to be like, oh yeah, that thing's a piece of shit. There's no place for it. Well, you know what? I'll say this. There is a place for it. It was a very important thing for people to see those full page ads in cannabis culture and High Times magazines back in the day, and to start putting their money into vaporizers. Now, some could say it was a bit of a step back when they ended up getting it. and all it did was really brown your herb and kind of not really give you many rips. And I'll definitely say it was probably in the late 90s that I started hearing a lot about Vaporbrothers. And when I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is a much better design. Like, so, and I'm sure that BC Vaporizer helped you guys come up with what not to do. Well,
if I could admit, our first model, #1, was a BC Vaporizer that had been taken apart, the heating element exposed, and my co-inventor basically stuck a piece of pipe thread straight on it and sucked air through it. He was wanting to draw the heat out of it more, and I was recognizing the convection going on. And so, yeah, they launched us. So did the eTerra. That's the other. BC Vaporizer and eTerra both got us into it. Those were what we had noticed.
Interesting. Well, we all have to stand on the shoulders of giants, all the people that come before us, all the people that come after us. You know, we get stuck in our egos sometimes, and we think that we're this individual and that we're the innovators, we're doing this, we're doing that, but there's no innovating. I mean, bubble bags would have never existed without isolator bags. It was first seeing the isolator bags that gave me the idea to add screens and to actually innovate. And it's not copying when you make a product better and you innovate and you stand on the shoulders of said giant to move things forward to that next level. That's kind of how we've gotten to where we are today with so many different incredible vaporizers on the market. I'm actually, go ahead.
I was gonna say it is not copying, but I understand about that. But you give acknowledgement to where your product came from. You give acknowledgement to where you got the inspiration for your product. A lot of these companies will just take right now your design and just be like, oh, well, we're the ones who did it first. Where they don't even give acknowledgement to the companies before them that actually pioneered the way. You know, well, so there's a difference to that.
You're in a difficult situation because you're in the pen market and you're like the only person in the pen market with high integrity. So you're like, you are in the biggest cesspool of them all. I know that when you first went to China to try and develop your designs and you threw all your terrible designs into the garbage that were not going to pass Gary's integrity test. What happened to those plans that got thrown into the garbage?
Well, you got to understand, China is a communist nation. The IP belongs to everybody. Even though that the designs are there, they're not being used, but they are being shared. So somebody from an engineer from another company has access to the designs that I had that was being given to our previous manufacturers. This is the whole story is almost 90 to 95% of the designs that are out there are basically based on what I've done since the year 2008. I'll tell you the story. In 2012, I was at a show, and my original oil tank that we had coming out, that came out in 2011, and I was at a show, and I'm looking at this guy, this company sell the tank, a knockoff of our tank, and I approached him and I asked him, hey, what's good about this tank and what's the difference between this and that? And he's giving me his sales pitch, and he's saying, well, we did this, we did that. I go, you understand that I'm the guy who designed this, right? You're telling me that it's doing things that it's never intended to do. And he looked at me like, oh shit, you know, I was just trying to con the guy who actually designed the tank. And I'm looking at him like, you guys even understand what you guys are doing? And you know, you're taking a design that's not even yours and just marketing it as yours. And he's like, oh, we changed the mouthpiece on it. Well, that doesn't make it a different design just because you changed the mouthpiece on it. You know, so it's companies like that are out there right now that are just causing a lot of problems for companies that are actually in it for the purposes that we're in it for. Like Linus said, he was there for, you know, just to bring a better device to the market, to allow people to not, you know, to allow people to get away from combustion. I got in it because a lot of people that I've met couldn't smoke, and eating wasn't the option for them. So we had to deliver the fastest way possible for THC and CBD to hit their system. And the only way to do that is the pulmonary, get it through the lungs. And how do I put this? It's a little bit difficult seeing the world, the way it revolves, and how people are attracted to marketing, bullshit marketing. That's all I can say right now.
Yeah, not only bullshit marketing, but like pricing. You could just copy someone's product, make it a fraction of the price because it's a fraction of the product. It's a piece of shit. And people gravitate towards that. I can't tell you how many people have bought really bad knockoff bags and then contacted me and been like, these bags fell apart, material fell into my hash, the screens blew out. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's like, yeah, yours were so expensive and I didn't really want to, jump into it. It's like, yeah, but mine are warranted for life. And I'll take care of you with customer service. Like, that's what you have to look at generally for a quality product that might be a little bit more expensive. You're going to get really good customer service. You're going to get incredible warranty. And you're not going to be bummed out if something happens on a fluke because the company's going to take care of you. You buy a piece of shit, you won't even be able to get back in touch with that company unless you push like 1 for sales. If you push 2 for customer service, it just rings and rings and rings and rings and rings. You gotta pretend you're buying more shit from those motherfuckers for them to even answer the phone.
Well, you gotta understand
the same person too.
Go ahead.
I said it's usually the same person too that picks up the phone for support and sales.
Yeah. That's always a good sign.
Well, you gotta understand. It's not only that. The aspect of it is the original company. Take for instance, like let's say company A who came up with the design. They have to spend research and they have to spend money on research and development. It's in the thousands. They have to spend money on molds and all of that. Now we can't produce it in the United States because of cost. The costs are outrageous when you actually produce something in the United States. And for us to protect our IP, even if you produce it in the United States, China can still copy it. And as Linus knows, he's taking companies to court, other companies to court for IP infringement is a lot of work and a lot of money being spent on ridiculous lawsuits. Now, if you produce it in China, okay, so now China has your IP, they can literally copy it and sell it to somebody else. Does that make sense? So the original company that has spent the money on research and development gets shafted because now their product has to be priced at, let's say, $100, while the knockoff comes in, doesn't have the overhead. Now they can price the same product for $50 and still, to walk away with profit.
Yeah, it's for sure a problem. It's just like anything, right? That you have the innovators, you have the passionately fueled innovators who, without them, the products would never come to be, because these are the people who are spending their time and their energy focusing on how can I make this concept work better? How can we make, and so it's not really about like, I just want to make millions of dollars. It's not about that at all. And you can kind of tell in the product and in the integrity of the person who's releasing that product. They really love their product. It's important to them. But once again, it's business, right? It's this cesspool of business. So you slowly take on the appearance, that metaphor of jumping into the pool full of shit and trying to not look like shit at the end of the day is a tough gig.
There's one other facet to that, guys. You have the people that have integrity and are more business oriented, but they have the integrity license from the innovators, license from that impassioned group or individual that sought the intellectual property, did what they were supposed to do to get their protections, and then they put their product out. They're paying a licensing fee back to a royalty back to that innovator, and then their product has to be a couple bucks more. And then they get beat up because their product is a couple bucks more, and the knockoffs benefited that same impassioned innovators' technology, and they're not paying the royalty. So I think it's important for just the consumers out there to recognize that there is some value in spending a few bucks extra, supporting the company that actually pays the royalty to the innovators, to keep supporting the innovators to keep innovating.
I am one of the very few people who do that very thing. I have paid royalty fees for bubble bags from 1999 all the way up into the future. So I've leased Reinhard Delp's patent for water extraction.
Rest in peace.
I'm like one of 4 people who have. Did you just say rest in peace? Did he pass away?
That was my understanding. Yeah, I heard Reinhard passed away not too long ago, bro.
Jeez, that's insane. I wondered why I hadn't heard from him. Man,
You're
that's
still
terrible.
supporting the family though, man. So you're doing the right thing.
No, absolutely. I did the right thing, and I was very happy to do it. And there was a very few handfuls of us that did it. Payloads Bags did it. Triple Extractor from out east in Canada did it. Those were the only companies that paid him royalties on. Clearly, when you follow that history, I'm not going to get into the whole thing right now, but it does kind of play into the conversation that we're having right now about, the innovators just want to innovate. We just want to just create and do new things with what the product that we have is. We want to make it better in some way, which often the problem with that is a lot of people think, well, what would really be better is if it was cheaper. And that's not really better.
Well, you got to understand, while Mark was talking about paying royalties and all of that, when we came out with the very first cottonless oil cartridge, we were approached by a massive distributor who was in the vaporizer industry, and literally told me, if I cannot distribute this product, I'm gonna knock it off. You either sell it only to me, or I'm gonna knock it off. It was literally like, okay,
that's practical.
And I told him, well, how are you gonna knock off my patent? He goes, it's very easy to circumvent the patent. I just have to change something on it. It doesn't have to be big. I just have to change something, and I will bury you in lawyer fees. And after that, I said, you know what? I'm not even going after patents anymore, because to even patent something in the cannabis industry it was nearly impossible in 2011, 2012. And till this day, it's still very, very hard to patent something in the industry. Paraphernalia itself cannot be patented. A few of them have patents, but you got to look at it this way. Even when they do have patents, they're still knockoffs. It just doesn't save anything. So royalties, it takes the individual who wants to license it to say, you know what, I'm going to pay royalties for this guy, even if he doesn't have patent, but he developed the technology. It takes the individual person. It takes, but in this industry, 99.99% of the people are not like that. They will literally use you and toss you out. They'll claim, oh, we're here, we got to work together. Bullshit. They turn around and stab you in the back.
Which is crazy, because what they're really saying is, can you put your hands together and give me a little boost? And you're like, sure. And as you bend down, they step on the back of your neck and jump up. It's like, that's not what I meant by standing on the shoulders of giants, just so you know.
Well, believe me.
So why don't we go through, I mean, we kind of have in a way already, but why don't we go through our histories of how we've gotten, each of you guys, how you really got into the passion of cannabis, and then how that led you, however many years later. That's what I really want, is the timeline back into vaporization. You want to start, Gary?
Sure. In the early 2000s, I started working in a laboratory. It was a medical laboratory where we did blood tests and all of that. I worked my way up until I ended up owning the laboratory itself, where I've met a lot of people that would come in. We would we would draw their blood for the testing and all that. And meeting a lot of these patients, to help me understand, because at that time I was not for cannabis as a medicine. I was totally against it. Actually, to me, it was just another drug, because I was brought up in a conservative family. So meeting these people.
Joe Strady.
What happened?
I said Joe Strady.
Oh, okay.
You were a Joe Strady. That's okay. You were a Joe Strady, and then you started to learn.
Yeah. So in about the mid 2000s, when I started, talking to these people, they helped me understand that, and they actually started helping me learn how to grow, because we became friends with a lot of them. And in 2007, they approached me about opening up a dispensary. 2008. 2008 is when we were able to open up the dispensary. And when we were opening up the dispensary, I saw one of the people using an electronic cigarette, and when I saw it, I'm like, how cool would it be if we can put a tincture in there? You know, the only thing at the time was literally glycerin, cannabis infused glycerin, and I'm like, how cool would it be? And the gentleman that was smoking it was a very good friend of mine, and he said, well, I tried, it just doesn't work because you take the cartridge apart, everything falls apart, you just can't put it in there. And if I can, it doesn't absorb too much because there's cotton in there and all of that. So we set out on a journey, and in the 2009-2010 era, we met a gentleman. We met a gentleman that was actually on the same path as we were, and he almost figured out how to put the glycerin inside the electronic cigarette. And we worked hard at it. Then it was still difficult because of the cotton inside. Then we met up with a Michael Backus from Cornerstone Research Center in Eagle Rock, California. That's when he said, I will put this on my shelf if you can get rid of the cotton inside the oil tank, which was based on electronic cigarette technology. Back then, you had to have cotton to be the medium to hold the glycerin. And at that time I said, well, it's impossible. He goes, well, I'll put it on my shelf if you actually can get rid of the cotton. So I went back and I back to the drawing board, and I went through maybe about 50 prototypes and a lot of fees doing the molding and the research and designs on them. And in 2011, we introduced the first oil tank that had no cotton inside. So that's what revolutionized the industry, because when you look at it, every other tank had the cotton and had the heating element wrapped around it or inside of the cotton. So after a few hits, you would actually start getting that burnt taste. And in 2011, when we introduced that, we sat back a little bit. We were like, patting ourselves in the back because we did something where nobody else was able to do. But before the 2011, we were also able to get pure oils into the cotton cartridges, which nobody else was able to do as well. So fast forward after 2011, 2012, 2013, we had another design that had the ceramic. This is where we're talking about where you said, oh, your designs were in the trash and nobody was using them, and all of a sudden it just became popular. Well, in the late 2012, 2013 era, we came out with the essential oil tank that had the ceramic wicks and all of that. But we only did a small production run of 100 to get a feedback of people and how it's used, and it had issues and it just didn't work right. So we shelved that whole design, and we decided to go a different route with the KISS cartridge, where it's load as you go leg systems. And when we shelved that idea, we actually totally forgot it, that we shelved the idea with a manufacturer that we don't work with anymore, because after 2013, we decided to open up our own manufacturing, because most of our ideas and designs were being literally licensed out to other companies where we had no control over it. So when we shelved that idea and we concentrated on the Hercules and the KISS cartridges in 2013, early 2013, afterwards we started working on the Triton series, and which has yet to come out. And all our designs where we reinforced the KISS cartridge, made it even better and better every year with every iteration of it coming out. Now, the last 2 years, I was looking at it, and all of these cartridges seem to come out and had a prefill. The prefill market within the past 2 years started booming. And I'm looking at the cartridges, I'm looking at it, I'm like, dude, this is my design. Everything that I've done in the essential oil tanks since 2008 up until 2012 is now being used in the refill market. And when I came out, like, hey, dude, that's my design. And people are like, no, that's not your design, man. You're just acting stupid. That's not your design. I go, listen, man, I even have forum conversations, and I'm showing images of a ceramic core back in 2012, 2013, on tanks. And guess what these new tanks are using? The same design. Yeah, it's changed, but it is based on that design because it's still, fast forward until now, we introduced the pure titanium grade heaters inside the cartridges, and we introduced the silicon carbide wicks. Check this out. In 2013, when we started using the silicon carbide wicks, we started calling them black ceramics. We called them black ceramics just for fun because we were pretty sure that the companies out there would start calling them black ceramic without knowing what it was. So, well, fast forward to 2016, 2017, and 2018, when companies started putting black ceramics into their oil vaporizers, we started calling ours silicon carbide. Okay, and being silicon carbide, because it was silicon carbide, we just called it black ceramic. Well, now companies are like, oh, well, now we're offering black ceramics. I mean, silicon carbide too. Well, for 2 years, you didn't know what was inside your cartridges. You were calling them black ceramics.
Well. You baited them well.
So when we started calling them silicon carbide, they're all of a sudden, left and right, they're coming out with cartridges that have now silicon carbides in them. Well, if they now have silicon carbide in them, what did they have before? It was just ceramic painted black.
Yeah.
So fast forward until now. How do I put this? Our main goal was in 2008 was for the patients and by the patients, because I was financed by patients, by old hippies, by old grandmothers. Literally, the people who helped me build the dispensary are the people that helped me finance the ideas that I had. And until this day, I will never give up on that. Where if my company is gonna go down, fine, I'll go down swinging, but I'm not gonna market bullshit. I'm not gonna use bullshit marketing tactics. I'm not gonna bullshit anybody. And that's the whole story of how we came into play is because I saw an electronic cigarette, and because Michael Backus said, you can't. I'll put it on my shelf once you can do this, and because of a couple of people along the way said you can't do it, and I did. I guess invention is the necessity of the time where if you're not put into a place where you have to get out, you're not going to invent. That's how I think of it.
Well, there's no doubt about that. The pen market sure blew up in a big, huge way. And it's kind of like, not until I met your old employee there, Samurai Sam, when he came up and took all these pens apart and showed me how terrible they were and how everything was super close to the element and how solder was getting vaped and these cotton, like all these different things, and sort of started explaining to me about your company. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can't just be using these things. Not that I used them a lot. I'd take them up on the mountain where I didn't want to have a dab rig or whatnot, but it's definitely feels better when it's this niche. Like for me, there's every vaporizer company in here right now, every vaporizer, I have 20 or 25 vaporizers. I have a whole variety because I find the best one to be the one that suits me at the time that I need it.
Well, you got to understand. I totally understand, but the market right now, you have to. I'm laughing myself, and I'm sometimes even pulling my hair out. Is why would people say it's okay to use stainless steel as a heating element? Why would people say it's okay to use Teflon like a millimeter away from the heating element? But right now that is the thing. It's people literally don't care. It's how cheap you can make it and how fast you can make it.
Well, Go ahead. Finish. No, finish.
No, the market itself, there's a lot of dubious players in it where they've literally gone in and they give out 50 free samples, and all of a sudden, oh, blah blah blah, this is just the greatest thing. Well, when you point out, oh well, it has this inside the heater, how's it better? Well, it's just better. It's just better. You know, it's just better. It's better than your product. It's just better. Well, how? Well, they don't give you an answer.
Here. I have an UpTech right here.
Oh yeah, the
That's what
Omicron.
we're talking about.
The Omicron.
Yeah.
I think that moves us perfectly. Sorry, I muted myself by accident. That moves us perfectly into Mark Mckoy and the Vriptech company, because when I first met Mark, he was like, yeah, you got to have the Steinel gun. You got to have the ceramic core. I'm like, ceramic core? Tell me more. What do you speak of? So why don't you give us your lowdown, Mark, on how you came to be passionate about vaporization?
I mean, again, I was just coming from that one-hit snap-through school of water pipe smoke in the West Coast style. I mean, admittedly, I perhaps started a little more on the recreational tint, but I've long time ascribed to Dennis Peron's perspective that it's really all medical, because whether you're taking that rip to chill and watch a movie or skate and create, you're still getting medical benefit whether you like it or not. As I got a little bit older and some of the aches and pains kicked in, and I realized I'd actually broken my back as a teenager and had some pretty severe muscle spasticity coming from something that wasn't going to easily heal. I realized that the cannabis literally just made those spasms disappear so freaking fast without the side effects of the pharmaceuticals that the doctors, who in all their wisdom, were prescribing. And I wasn't as active at the time because I was a little bit laid up, and you know, I kind of transitioned from water pipe smoking with lighters to uncoated wood matches to vaporizing with heat guns, and it just made really an organic transition. And at the time, I'd been studying medical aromatherapy, the work of the Swiss and the French, and was very interested in natural cosmetics and essential oils. And yeah, I want to say that was late 90s, 95, 96. And it's, you know, I'd gotten turned on to the Eagle Bill vape by Doug Mignola and Adam Dunn. And that sort of changed everything for me. I was working on a shower apparatus for putting essential oils into your shower water flow. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night after playing with the heat gun for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months. And I realized the fluid mechanics and the gas mechanics were exactly the same. And the only way I was going to emulate that real fulfilling full spectrum rip I was able to get out of a small glass bowl with very careful, slow lighting with the wood match was with the Venturi effect, Bernoulli's principle. I realized, well, shoot, it's been right here in front of you the whole time. So I developed the concept of the 2-piece vaporization chamber bowl, wrote some notes middle of the night, went back to sleep, and the next day I was in Berkeley, California at R&D Glass, basically groveling to get them to make some pieces for me. And I told myself at the time I was not going to enjoy any cannabis until I figured it out. I thought it might just be a couple of iterations. Well, actually, I thought naively I might nail it right out of the gate. And the flow form physics, lo and behold, a little more complicated than one might think. Took me about 3 months. My bros were all very happy to be the guinea pigs, but yeah, I'll never forget when we finally figured it out. And we created a chamber bowl that worked really well with the old Steinel guns. And I'd already looked at some of these heat guns. You know, they've been in the history of some of the cannabis pioneers playing with them for a while. Figured out that the Steinel German design, Swiss manufactured ones had a stainless nozzle and a non-alumina ceramic encapsulated nichrome element. So your air was actually going past the ceramic and the stainless. And although far from perfect, it worked pretty freaking well, rigged up with a nice sized water pipe, and we were able to dial in the technique to get really full profile vapor right to the edge of smoke, or just barely beyond if you wanted that hybrid experience, or even lower temp and just vaping on the terpenes if that was your thing. And that led to all kinds of experimentation with other herbs and botanicals mixed and on their own. And of course, eventually with the inside of my beekeeper bro Nebu, our beekeeper bro Nebu, we started playing with propolis and really vaporizing the same way the Scythians did, because they always had propolis on their rocks in those steam tents. They were throwing their cannabis seeds there by the article in herb. But remember, where do seeds come from? Seeds are in the flowers. So the Scythians also get credit for being the first to really vaporize specifically flower material. And yeah, here we are today. We took a few iterations on the bowls. Ultimately, glassblower Steve there inspired Jason King with some of his inside out pieces on soldering irons. And I paid Steve to make some iterations for us that we played with for years. Seibo was one of the early adapters, got to play with it. And I remember just not thinking the world was ready for a hot piece of glass. But in fact, I'll give Seibo a lot of credit as one of the bros who really was like, man, you got to just turn people onto this. It's time. And yeah, you know, we took a few iterations, getting the elements right and getting, you know, the glass sorted so that we could make it in a production environment. It's still the hardest piece we make, but when you when you dial into it, if you like the ritual of water pipe smoking to it, milk it up, take a rip, you know, to your taste, you can dial it to the way you like to session. It's hard to beat, man. It's you know, I still get a lot of emails from folks just saying, you know, I love the system, but I got it, you know, you kind of ruined everything else for me. It's the problem.
Was that the based on the hot glass?
Yeah, the hot glass. That's
okay,
right.
Okay, so yeah, Brian's brother. That
or
thing.
Brian, that's right.
Well, Brian's brother, because Brian was the one that turned me on to it, but he told me really it was his brother that kind of designed it, and I guess he would blow the glass for it. But yeah, that's great that you guys are still doing those. It's I thought it was lightweight and easy. It went in and out of the bowl nice, and it definitely was glass on glass on glass.
Yeah, we now have glass screens. We have custom tool joints, so you can pretty much plug and play on any water pipe or bubbler out there. And yeah, all glass, heating, extraction, and delivery. And what I've found is, even relative to many of the technical ceramics that I've played with, you simply can't get a better terpene expression than with all glass or quartz. That neutral polarity of those materials really does make a difference. You know, people are talking terps quite a bit these days, but you know, it's not just about the chemistry, it's about the polarity, the energetic component. And if you're using a metal element or metal chambers or even metal screens to some extent, you're changing the expression from what you would have got just in those first couple pulls off a proper cone.
Agreed 100%, particularly having a terpene company and having access to terpene profiles derived from cannabis, and having access to all these different vaporizers. It leads us beautifully into Sabo from VapeXhale, because the VapeXhale was the first unit that I found I could legitimately preserve the terpene profile from pure terps, because I was hitting them on like a D-nailed, like a sick dish or a sapphire dish or quartz banger. And they were delicious, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't until I hit it through the VapeXhale on super low temp in the quartz rod, dropped into the glass tube with the heated, like just the preservation. That's the word I use constantly. I'm like, it preserves the fucking profile. This is almost what it smells like when you smell it in the jar, rather than it made me realize how different it was, you know, convection versus conduction, I guess you would say. Like, putting it right on that dish and having it just explode is not as gentle as having it go into the VapeXhale tube and just like gently volatilizing out into my bubbler. So why don't you go ahead, Seibo, introduce yourself, tell us about the VapeXhale and how you came to be. I know it's relatively new, but your history might go back further. I don't know. Give us a go.
Yeah. So we talked about standing on the shoulders of giants, and well, there's one, I'm staring at him right now, Mark McCoy. So I give a lot of credit. Actually, pretty much everything I know, I owe to Mark. I was lucky enough when I started consuming cannabis as a 21-year-old. I was really late to the game just because I felt that as a health conscious person, I didn't want to put any smoke in my body, but I had been a stunt man, putting myself through college, and the injuries were building up. And finally I started utilizing some cannabis, and I bought the first vaporizer I bought was the BC Vape. It wasn't very good. And then ultimately I bought the Vriptech system, and I noticed that the return address was in the same hometown that I grew up. And ultimately, I emailed Mark. He allowed me to come over, and I'd only been consuming cannabis for a few months at that time, and so he was really educating not just the vaporization aspects of cannabis, but just cannabis in general, very holistically, how it was grown, how it was cured, how you make hash, how you trim it properly. So I feel very, very lucky from the get-go that I was learning from a Yoda Jedi master, and he kind of introduced me to a bunch of different people. Like, you know, I remember the bubble bags, you know, like he was telling me all about hash. At that point, I was just getting into flowers. So this hash thing was like way beyond me. And ultimately, you know, like he showed me all these different systems. I love the heat gun system. It was one of my favorites. I introduced so many of my friends in college to it. And then when he moved to the glass wand style, it was just amazing. And as he mentioned, you know, I was really encouraging him to really get the word out and to really promote this type of ingestion methodology. And I just love vaporization in general. I bought the Vaporbrothers. I'm a customer of the W9 UpTech products as well. His sales rep used to come over and show me the ins and outs of how to use the pen. So I just feel really, really blessed to be here, to be able to talk about, you know, vaporization in general, and also kind of what inspired me. And ultimately, Mark is also a well, he not only influenced me on healthy cannabis consumption, but, you know, Mark is a very active person. He also eats a very, you know, healthy diet. So I try to emulate a lot of those things and really try to be a healthy person holistically, you know, not just with my cannabis consumption, but with how I treated my body with exercise, what I put into my body, even some, you know, spiritual type of development as well. And ultimately, you know, I've had bought over 150 different vaporizers from 1997 to 2011. At that time, I had been working at a startup. Actually, the startup was really close to Mark's house. And my boss, after we had sold our company to Salesforce, my boss was asking me what I was doing. And I told him I had been helping Mark sell vaporizers. And ultimately, he asked if, you know, if he gave me some capital, if we could design one ourselves. And that was the impetus for creating the device. I called my good buddy Mark. I told him I had this opportunity to create a vaporizer, and if he'd be okay with it. He gave me his blessing. So, you know, I think we were talking about at the beginning, I mean, Dennis Perron just passed away yesterday. There's a lot of people here that influenced us, that gave us this opportunity to be here. And, you know, I think it's important to let Mark know. And I think he knows. I mean, he's been to my wedding. We were on an airplane together. We got a chance to catch up recently. But if I've never told him this, you know, he is the guy that taught me everything and the reason I'm sitting here. So thank you, Mark. And that's my story. Hopefully it didn't put people to sleep.
Nice, Seibo. Very nice. Shout out to Mark.
Too
That's
kind,
awesome.
Seibo. Too kind.
Absolutely. I think it was pretty accurate too. I've known you a long time. I would agree with pretty much everything he just said. I was stoked to get you on.
I actually remember the stories John was telling me. He's like, yeah, I'm actually going to go meet Sabo at VapeXhale and talk about his VapeXhale that I think the Evo that at that time was coming out in 2012.
Correct.
That was the model, Sabo? Yeah, so he actually was meeting up with you to talk about the Evo and all of that. And he's told me that you guys were actually using the Omicron, the older versions of the Omicrons, where you guys had your sessions together. And hopefully we can meet up because I even told him back then, I was like, I wish I was up there with you guys, you know, get to meet and sit down and talk. But hopefully after this, so we can you know, all exchange contact information, you know, talk to each other about the industry and all of that. You know, something good should come out of this, I hope.
I think it will. And I think this is the beauty of what Bubbleman is doing here with this program, is bringing a lot of people together. I mean, I kind of feel it's weird that Mark and I are speaking more now over the show than we have, you know, we just live a couple miles away from each other, but we'll make it happen.
I'm living
no worries.
away now, actually.
Mark, with you, I was actually talking to Bubbleman, Marcus, and I was like, hey, Marcus, I got this project I'm doing, and I don't want to promote it. And he's all like, well, Mark from Vriptech, and he's already got that. And I'm like, really? Yeah, he goes, he's already got that. Okay, that's fine. At that time, I knew of your company. I just didn't know it was a full glass air path. That when you just said it right now, there's full glass air path. Now I'm thinking I should go back to the drawing board again because I need to make it different now. It is a different design. We are working on something that's a desktop that's full glass air path. But the only difference I think between ours and yours is you use a ceramic heater. We don't. And ours is designed to look like a spaceship because everything in our company is named after sci-fi stuff. I'm a Star Trek fan and a Futurama fan because as you can see, we have our vaporizers named Omicron Persei 8, and that was that idea was given to us through another friend. As like, hey, why don't you just, if you have your Omicron, why don't you call the second one Persei and the third one an 8? I go, well, let's do it since I like Futurama. But after that, after we named all our products, Futurama did an episode about us. Did you know that, Marcus?
What?
Yeah, Futurama did an episode about us.
That's awesome.
T the Terrestrial, that's what it's called. The episode, I think, is season 7. The T the Terrestrial, that's what it is. But either way, looking at going back retrospectively, there's a lot of companies that out here. Even when you showed me that, Seibo, the bubbler that you have, there was a lot of talk in 2013 and 2014 with people knocking off, because I think you own the patent for the joint on the bottom of the bubbler, don't you?
Correct.
Wow. Yeah, there was a lot of talk on the forums of people knocking that off and how that's not going to be doable and all of that. But either till this day, people are still knocking it off, and it's pretty difficult for you to go after.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the patents the same way as you, which is they're kind of like nuclear bombs. You never use them, you just threaten them, and if people decide they're gonna play chicken with you, then you guys could have a legal battle. But the clear winner is typically just the attorneys that are getting paid all those billable hours, and it is such a tough thing. It is such a tough thing.
That is the 100% truth right there. Go ahead, Linus.
I think for all the work that you put into a patent, and we got patents too, and I think for all the work you put in, there's some good that comes out of it because it deters large businesses from knocking you off. So you'll deal with all these small things that you can't whack-a-mole or whatever, and it would cost more money than designing new vaporizers. So you don't do it, and just for the kind of the hippie ethic of it's better to put money into developing your next thing and staying relevant rather than trying to fight people. But anyway, the deterrent value, I think, is there. I hope we've all been helped. For all of us who have spent time and money on a patent and paid the lawyers so much, someone like Volcano or a giant company, well, maybe they would knock you off, but my theory is that they don't, and people with pockets won't rip you off straight off when you have a good patent, and maybe that's prevented a lot of us from being knocked off by actual serious competitors.
Well, you got to understand, people with pockets won't knock you off, but they will bury you in legal fees. Just to make sure you don't, your patent is invalidated. Just look at J.P. Morgan, Chase, and Tesla. That's basically what happened. He made sure that Edison got the patents got his patents, and Tesla was basically invalidated after that.
Why don't we?
Dilemma.
Yeah, indeed. I think we've gotten now after Seibo to Linus. I know you kind of told your story a little bit, but give us the full sort of like Vaporbrothers, but before, the passion that led you to want to do this and kind of get deep into wanting the Vaporbrothers to be the most sold vaporizer.
Well, the passion that goes way back. The memory doesn't always go that far back. But I remember that it seemed like pot was a good thing. It seemed like people around it were good people, many. It seemed like it helped people to be good people. Back when I learned about acid, that's such a time commitment, and it's a little scary too. It seemed like weed was a good substitute for it. It was kind of a poor man's acid. And now that I realize how hard life is for a lot of people, I realized I was kind of a privileged kid because I was able to go to college and stuff. At the same time, when I proposed to, my parents, which is pretty conservative, what I wanted to do in life, maybe, they would come back with, well, what's that going to do good for the world? And that kind of invalidated a lot of things that I might want to do with my life that were just like fun or neat or ego driven or something. And that stuck with me, and I was like, okay, I'd better use my my tools. I wasn't doing that well in college. I was like a permanent student, but it allowed me to take a lot of different things. And so I thought I should bring together the things I'd been taught from the engineering or interest in physics, anything from computers and the world, history, and now health, of course. Um, so that kind of led to me trying to make these tiny bowls because I was actually kind of looking for less body impact because smoking really does, well, you smoke as much as you can until you're coughing if you're going for that. Vaporization, once we discovered our way to do it, was really, well, less body impact doesn't just mean you vaporize and feel better, but you can vaporize more and feel fine. And as soon as marijuana started becoming clear medicine, this isn't just recreational, this isn't just for fun, these aren't just kids trying to get high and call it medicine, they're actual patients needing it. It became an important thing. And kind of a coincidence with us wanting to impress smokers. Our device was great for taking of medicine because it created some high temperatures that we believe converts the THC into very pain relieving components. Actually, I'm stating that wrong, but the higher temperatures that we were getting on this, which is basically you're riding the fine line between vaporizing and smoking. We're not a pure vaporizer unless you turn it down, but at its normal setting, when you're drawing it, you're kind of riding this fine line between getting it too hot and not hot enough. And at that point, you're impressing the smokers because I think you're creating a lot of the same components that they are used to. Kind of that quick effect plus the body effect to it. But moving ahead, I was also, as I mentioned before, was trying to cut down. I also wanted to be a better student, and it wasn't helping. It was helping with creativity, but math not so good, and I wasn't that great at math. So, but my attempts to cut down created this kind of stronger, more efficient alternative. And I never felt like people quitting cold turkey anything is a great thing because the thing is not necessarily bad. They just want to cut it down. And so to cut something down, it's nice to find something that is stronger in its own way. And so vapor became this stronger alternative. And some people were surprised to know that we still smoked, but whatever, do both. That's one thing that we told people who were not impressed by vapor. Oh, really? The vapor's not doing it that much for you. Sure, you want to smoke, smoke also. And they got an effect that was way beyond what they could have if they had just smoked. And some of those people went to vapor full time. We started getting reports back from people that it had changed their life or saved their life. This thing about less body impact also allows people, as I said, to smoke more. And for some people who really need the medicine, like some people were simply depressed, and marijuana would make them less depressed. And with that little kind of substitute for acid effect, it kind of would help them come into a more perfect like personhood. Like you can think certain things through, and you can get somewhere sometimes in your mind on it. And then with these people able to take more, they couldn't take enough smoking. Their lungs were done. Some people were a lot older than us and were like, I can't smoke. I haven't smoked in years. But with your vaporizer, I do it every day, and this thing has saved my life. Once we hear that a few times, we realize we need to do this, and it's good for the world. Um, um, but there's so many things I could get into there. I mean, there were a lot of people who helped us along the way and who really became the Vaporbrothers. Vaporbrothers is not just two brothers. I have a brother, but my partners were like our bros. And a lot of some people, well, for us to start spreading faster, we lived in Venice at the time. We wanted to get to Woody Harrelson as fast as possible because he had helped another hemp company called Hempstead. They were the first like really good looking hemp clothes in LA. You could be fashionable and wear hemp. It wasn't all like rough. This isn't hemp. I'm pointing at it. This is though. They weren't just like rough and ugly. It was kind of shiny and finely made fabric and whatever. That kind of blew up and made Woody not want to invest in companies anymore. But through his friends who actually took our company and made it into a thing, they were so into it. This one guy, his name now is Hippie Steve, and another guy named Dr. Richard D'Andrea. They hosted me, they hosted the Vaporizer, and they introduced it to everybody who came through. And one of these guys had a music studio in the back. He used to, he called it Smoking Toads, his band. He used to do something similar to Smoking Toads. I hope they weren't actually harvesting from toads. But they would make music to go along with that, and you could listen to this music when you did DMT, and it was like, you can't really listen to normal, contrived, radio-friendly music for going on such a trip. He vaporized everybody who came through there. There were people who were recording their jazz bands. They were like, oh, we only smoke joints, we only smoke bongs. And he'd like, well, try this. And they were converted, basically. And it was helping them. We were very kind of hippy-dippy, like wanting to reject the world of toxins. Toxic food was extremely popular. Things like vegetarian food were just becoming really palatable and good and thick and heavy and greasy and lovable. And we hope to do that with vapor. Turn it from something that might be a little too light or stale or have other reasons why people would not want to do it. Let me fast forward again. We also wanted to make a device that was very simple. With this toxic world thing, we wanted to get all the toxins out of the vaporizer. And with me knowing that our formula was a very hot heating element inside, it's almost 1,000 degrees on the surface of the heater. It has to be that way to heat the air quickly and give you the 400, 300 degrees air that you need to flow through the herb and vaporize the herb just right. Something that hot is going to smell, and when it smells, you're inhaling particles of that thing. So if it's a hot heating element, you smell hot metal, you're smelling a little bit of hot ions. So that's why we converted over to ceramic as soon as we could. Hot ceramic smells like hot stone. There's barely anything in it. Ceramic can handle 3,000 degrees before melting or breaking down, and this sits here at 1,000. So that was very safe for us. There's glass around it. At the bottom is medical grade silicone, which can handle the 400 degrees that it needs to touch. Everything in the box is meant to more than handle what temperature it gets to, even if the box is upside down and the air vents are blocked. The point was we didn't want people inhaling parts of the vaporizer, and a lot of vaporizers can do that. I know with Mark's vaporizers, he used the best heat guns that he could get, the Steinel. When Seibo came along, one of the things that stuck with me when Seibo gave us some advice once was that he was wanting to position his vaporizer as like the iPhone of vaporizers, and with the all-glass air path all the way through to where the air is inhaled into the vaporizer, it stays within glass and never picks up anything. Our vaporizer inhales from kind of the inside and the bottom, but what we did to every part in the box is to remake it to be not exhaling smell when it gets warm. We would even redesign the LED board, the controller board, to be correct. No parts get hot. That's what makes cheap devices too, by the way. Cheap devices, when they put it in, they don't do all the work to make sure that every component doesn't overload itself. Some resistors can get hot and start smelling like burnt plastic, and that's just the smell of Chinese stuff sometimes. But what we did was try to lead-free solder, all the stuff that we wanted to do to assure ourselves that we could inhale from this thing the rest of our lives and not have trouble. We also inhaled air into vacuum cylinders that were sent to industrial hygiene labs, which would test the vapor, test the whatever might be coming off the vaporizer. And so we made sure that we got it good to where our vaporizer was safer than just inhaling air like in your office. And by the way, the air in your house and in your office is not that great, especially after your laser printer has printed a paper. Another thing, people are very worried about metal ions. The industry doesn't know about metal ions. Like the whole manufacturing world around there doesn't care. If the material's not melting, they think it's great. And something that could be really hot could smell like metal, and you're inhaling those metal ions. We got rid of the metal, but while we still had the metal, we had to realize we just simplify it. Don't pick, like what UpTech mentioned, stainless steel. You don't want chromium coming off of it. Pick simple materials like iron and the nichrome wire that we had to have that could off-gas something, but make it small. But what I realized was your kitchen has an electric range that has almost the same materials running at almost the same temperature at a much larger scale, and you're inhaling that forever. So you can't make anything like just perfect. We're always going to inhale something, but our point was to make it much better than what you're inhaling every single day.
I think the point, Linus, you're saying is we want to reduce what we're the amounts we're inhaling. We don't want to make it more with by adding a box vaporizer, by adding any type of vaporizer. We don't want to increase that. We want to reduce it, where we're basically some of us actually trying to reduce our carbon footprint. So I think that's what you're trying to say, correct?
Yes, exactly. And you know what? Call it a harm reduction device. From the very beginning, vaporizers haven't they been called harm reduction devices? Like, Mark, did you use that term?
Absolutely. I mean, it's through all three of our utility patents. We push the concept of harm reduction for smoking of any botanical, not just cannabis. But yeah, I mean, what you said in the middle of Linus really, I think, will stick with me. I think is a good way for the viewers to think about it. Don't vaporize your vaporizer, and if you're using a vaporizer that requires you to vaporize your vaporizer, even just trace amounts of it, it's probably not the best vaporizer for you.
Yeah, and a harm reduction device is a good term because, especially with e-cigarettes, I'm going to just sidestep over to actual e-cigarettes with juice, propylene glycol. Sounds horrible. All the stuff that's in them, whatever. It's a harm reduction device. You vape a bunch of e-cigarettes, you're going to live a whole lot longer than if you burn cigarettes into your lungs. So with harm reduction devices, it's not like there's zero harm. You're inhaling a moisture into your lungs. I don't know what lungs are meant to take in, but I don't know if they evolved to inhale a whole bunch of particles and moisture. But it is so much better. It's hard with, I don't know if it's just Americans, but we're very all one way or the other way. Oh my God, a little bit of, right now they're finding out, actually, this is a whole nother conversation. They're finding out that there's a little bit of benzene in marijuana when it's cooked, especially at very, very high temperatures, like dabbing on a very, very hot surface. They're finding that, but their finding is less than what you're inhaling all the time. And some people are like, oh my God, I need to stop. And what are you going to do? Go to things that have more, harm or whatever. But I'd like to wrap up just a few thoughts of where we were going with this, though. The not tasting your vaporizer, there's a lot of practical implications for that. For one thing, with vaporizing, you taste what you got purely. Someone who produces material can use a vaporizer to test how pure their material is just by their taste buds. I mean, your taste and your smell can tell a lot of things that it even takes test equipment to find out. The odor threshold. Certain chemicals above the odor threshold are, well, sorry, I go in circles sometimes, though. I don't.
No, I think you said something very accurate there.
Yeah, the other practical thing was, this is getting back to reliability of it and not inhaling things. We, with not the biggest budget ever, we got a little bit of help from Woody Harrelson's friend, not from him, well, little from him, but more like the heart help. With not a lot of money, to make this thing work better, we needed to simplify it, and we just have less parts in it. And simplifying it also meant no fan, no reliance on flowing air in this. I really respect the companies who do have good electronics, temperature controls, fans, and things. They really hold the temperature right there where they say they do. This thing has no temperature readout. We just evolved our method to not need it. And what's really nice about this device in the middle of the night, like at 1 a.m., and I'm not all into acid or anything, but just to bring back that story, let's say everybody is on mushrooms or something in the house and we're all kind of weird, and it's finally kind of gotten to its place and people are kind of going deeper, and someone realizes they want to vaporize, smoke, or, oh no, let's vaporize. Hey, pull out your thing. We had a volcano. Actually, I very much respect the volcano for being a lot. I could talk about that for a while. Anyway, we had a volcano and a Vaporbrothers on the bar in this guy's house, and just the thought of turning the volcano on in the middle of the night, crackly, bag. Everybody use this, because the only sound it makes is the correct whistle that you should hear when you're pulling the air at the right speed.
It's psychedelic friendly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's something you did, and the thing is absolutely quiet, and that became part of it. And that also, I think, helped it get into a lot of people's houses, because people were not ready to have anything that they would call paraphernalia being out in the open, especially when their parents came home or friends came over or something. It was kind of scary to have this. So we tried to make it very beautiful so it could stay on their counter and not look like anything. This thing actually rode around in the automobile, and no one would even... Once someone actually broke into a car to steal one, we were pretty proud of that. But for a long time, no one recognized this as anything. Oh, it's a pencil sharpener? But yeah, that's a good beginner of like how we spread. Eventually we became, okay, we need to become a company, and we became a corporation, and corporatizing caused me to have to split up with my main partner, which really sucked. He was a co-owner, and I had to buy him out, and that sucked heavy. But he couldn't hang with the corporate culture, and a lot of what corporations have to do was totally antithetical. Is that the right word? To a lot of our kind of hippie ethics, but we continued with ethics as being our strong suit, also without a lot of money. If you're a good person and you're ethical and you're helping people, you spread. You don't need money to do it. We never spent money on marketing. We eventually figured out how to do ads, and they were always so odd, but you had to do it to get out to stores and to go to the trade shows and stuff. But really, we rode on trying to be good people, have good product, keep improving it, and not do the things that seemed wrong to us. And that's basically where we still are, though. I'm actually really, it's awesome. Just someone new came on. It's awesome to see all 5, now 6 of us Bubbleman, you really got the innovators here.
Yeah, I try to put the, once I built the traction of the channel, it was kind of like, oh, what should I do with the traction of this channel? Should I turn my channel into a cheesy bubble bag advertisement center where I just sell all my products shamelessly? Or do I invite all the other innovators that I know that are some of them, many of them are even more inspiring than the things I've done, and sort of share that traction and then have them help grow it and build it even more. And it brings us, thanks for sharing, Linus. That was a great story. I just
Yeah.
I feel like
What you're doing is really important, not just to us, but I think for the movement, because even all those knockoffs, they still rely on us to come up with stuff.
Absolutely.
We all here created an industry that they see as money, and they're raising their kids on it. And our employees raised a bunch of kids, and they do, even though knockoffs seem like a pest, they aren't going to keep going, and vaporizing is not going to keep going unless innovators like us keep trying to do what we do.
That's it. It's just pushes you to go to the next level, and it's perfect timing because it brings us to Task, who just came into the room. Welcome, dude. Totally stoked to have you here. I was, I just only have 7 days to organize and curate this show for each week. It's like Sunday's over, and then tomorrow, Monday, I'm like, I got 7 days before I got to have the next show ready. So I'm sorry I didn't put the invitation out earlier to you, but I think that, one of the things that Task did with the electric nail and the highly educated products is he really took this whole like vaporization thing, made it even more, it made it the ultimate for convenience for the dabbing world. And I mean, maybe even was, I don't know, you're going to share your history right now with us once I shut my mouth, but I'm not sure if like it was even the start of the dabbing culture. Obviously we were doing hot knives, and the Mayor existed for doing the hot spoon dabs, but dabbing, really dabbing, like heating up a dish with the electric nail, like that pretty much coincided with the release of your product, did it not? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, I can't unmute you. You got to push the mute button on your screen there. I mute everyone's. There you go. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect, man.
All right. Well, first off, don't worry about the late invitation. I always say if you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute. So we're all good on that. But as far as highly educated goes, there were nails before we started. In fact, you talk about building on the shoulders of giants. I had just purchased my first titanium nail back in 2010 off of Aqualab. They were sold out immediately after, so I couldn't buy another one. My friends couldn't buy one. I had a friend who was a machinist, and so I just took the nail over to the machine shop. We made a few modifications and just started making them for ourselves. After several weeks, I looked at Aqualab, saw they were still out of stock, and realized that there was a potential business opportunity there. So I sent them an email, just said, hey, we have these available. If I'm stepping on anybody's toes, if I'm violating a patent or someone's design or intellectual property, let me know. And it turned out that the person who was manufacturing at the time was a gentleman named Cably. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Cably nail, but it was the titanium nail that existed before highly educated. And he had taken, from my understanding, so this is all allegedly, but from one side of the story, Cably had taken money for an order and just kind of disappeared. And so he created this vacuum that we stepped into, started innovating. I owe a lot of highly educated success to the people that I've surrounded myself with. I've been I would describe myself as a lucky fool. My machinist, Dave, who, helped me first replicate. He is such a very left brain individual. He's always building his own servers. He's basically built his own Netflix platform that's private, where he rips all his own DVDs. He gives me access to it. Just this weird genius guy. And so I had the idea of doing an electronic nail because I knew that the torch for dabbing was seen as sort of a negative connotation. People associated it with, smoking meth or doing weird hardcore drugs like that. And we wanted to try and remove the torch from the equation if possible, to make it more socially acceptable. We didn't really understand what we were doing in the or what we were going to get as the outcome of the product. But I just had the idea. Anybody can have an idea. You know, it's easy to have an idea. The genius that did the email is a gentleman by the name of Dave Jensen. And I just told him what I wanted. I knew that other people were going to be working on it. I figured that it was important for us to get to market first. And so I just put a lot of pressure on him to come up with a design. And our first problem was, back then, the domeless design didn't exist. It was just all dome and nails. And so the hardest thing for us to figure out was, how are we going to get wires inside of this dome contraption and not compromise, you know, the integrity of the airflow, or getting the wires all gunked up in reclaim, just certain things around that. So we were trying to figure that out. And during this time, we ended up coming out with the V3 adjustable nail. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it was an adjustable nail for the domes that could make it adjust to certain heights, because not all glass contraptions came to the same standard sizes. Some people had larger domes, other people had smaller domes, and so the V3 nail could adjust up and down. And again, you know, that wasn't even my design either. That could be attributed to the genius of Chad from Healthstone Glass, who, you know, another person in this industry who helped pioneer some different vaporization essential products. And he actually pitched that idea to me in an online chat like this. And so, you know, all praise to Chad for that idea. But after that came out, we started thinking, okay, so what's next for the nail? Like, what's after? What else can you do to these things? And we thought, well, what if the shaft was hollow? What could you do then? And I started thinking, well, the hollow shaft doesn't make any sense. And then I was like, well, it does if you take the dome away. But we were working on a prototype, and right at that time, the first domeless nail came onto market that I'm aware of, was called the KO domeless nail. And I believe it was developed by a guy named Kevin Nail. If I remember correctly, Gary might know some more about that, because I remember he was around in that time frame as well. Anyways, once I saw the domeless nail, and once we had our first prototype of our domeless nail out, I immediately realized, you know, we've unlocked the solution for getting the cables into the nail now, without by removing the dome. We can now just get a heating element wrapped right around it. I pitched the idea to my machinist, and he spent, you know, a week or two researching components, found, you know, a PID, found a heating coil from a heating manufacturer who would go on to end up, you know, fucking us over later on, but that's a whole other story. And he, you know, got the sheet metal lasered out, the sheet metal to cut and bend the housings for the electronic units. You know, some of these components, like the PID, came from overseas, but as far as everything else, it was fully cut, built, assembled here in the United States. And he built 4 prototypes. I took one of them with me to the San Francisco Cannabis Cup I think it was in 2010. It might have been 2011, actually. And that's where we showed it off for the first time, and it was a major hit. And with the release of the e-nail, we started to kind of discover, you know, lower temperature dabs. When the e-nail first came out, there weren't carb caps. And so in order to put a dab on that would fully cook off within your breath, it had to be set at 1085 Fahrenheit on the coil. And that, everybody hearing that now would probably be like, wow, that's incredibly hot. But without a carb cap back then, that was almost the temperature you had to have it set at to make all of the oil cook away. And So anyways, that was how the e-nail came to be. I don't want to ramble on too long because I'll start tying my entire stories all together. But that was the invention of the e-nail. It was a guy named Dave Jensen who was a machinist, and I just pitched the idea to him, and he helped me make it come to life. But in the end, we only ended up selling 150 units. That was kind of a sad story for us. So while we birthed the e-nail industry, we never really got to fully enjoy it due to that e-nail coil manufacturer, that whole other story, which I could tell you at another time. But
we could do a whole show on how we've all been fucked over and out in our business trials and tribulations, which is for sure.
Marcus, sorry to cut you off. I remember Taz coming out with the e-nail. It was a hilarious story. Back in 2012, he came over at the Cali Connection booth at the San Francisco High Times. I don't know if he remembers that or not, but he plugged the e-nail, and in retrospect, it's hilarious right now. But it was a very, very sad moment at that time where he plugged the e-nail, and I think half the show's power just literally went out. Remember that, Taz?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my God.
We turned around and we're like, dude, we didn't even get to hit the e-nail, and it just took out everybody on like the West Coast. So like, dude, all right, we're gonna. No,
I blame the show for that. They got it back up, and then the e-nail worked. I like to add that the e-nail did work for the rest of the show. But yes, it definitely did cause a little power outage there for a moment.
That was actually a prototype, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was one of the 4 prototypes.
What year was that?
That's my experience with the original one right there.
What year was that?
He said 2012. That might be it. That might be it. I thought 2011, but it might be 2012. My sense of time just not good.
Well, it's interesting.
Believe me, man.
To have the different groups, to have the different groups of you guys in here, from like, Gary with the pen aspect, with Mark from so many years ago, as well as Vaporbrothers with these different, produce your own air, forced air. The first time I ever Vripped was definitely like a memorable experience. With Task, with Highly Educated, like definitely helping popularize dabbing for certain. That's the first name I heard, with the titanium nails and the carb caps. So very cool. And now Sabo out with the VapeXhale, in my opinion, one of the kind of younger up and coming guys that's just got the super flair and the excitement, and is able to articulate his message, and is intelligent, and has a great little unit. Like
Sabo inspired me before I ever got into it, before I ever saw Highly Educated. I mean, weren't you Stone Monkey or Stoner Monkey or something like that?
That is me, and that is my gamer tag on PS4. So if anyone wants to find me, Stone Monkey 55.
I remember back in the day, before I even started Highly Educated, I was using the heat gun to vaporize weed. I even made a song about it, heavy duty heat gun.
Well, that all starts with Mark McCoy, so it's cool.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
How everything is paying it forward.
Yeah, the first time I hit one of those heat guns was probably from Eagle Bill, but the first time it rocked me was definitely with Mark McCoy. He was like, yeah, that's because you just got a Vrip. I was like, damn. All right. Oh, it's great to have this conversation going. I guess at that point in time, we're in the discussion. We did the past. We're in the current. We're in the present of vaporization. And I guess, if you guys wanted to get into a particular type of conversation, I don't know if we want to flow naturally or if we want to direct it into what we all think the future of vaporization is. That's what we're going to kind of hammer out for the last hour of the show. But we still have a little bit of time if we want to talk about the present still, what's going on today. I mean, there's a lot going on out there as the cannabis industry blows up worldwide. I wonder if vaporizers will really ever finally transfer over. When Mark met me back in the day, you must have been to the melting point and seen the inhalation station of vaporization. That was pretty early for its time.
Absolutely.
Because the law was illegal, but because the law was legal, we had exemption 56s. We had these sort of MMAR licenses that people could have in Canada. So I just use the mentality that, well, it's not up to me to police people to see if they have a license to consume cannabis medically. I can just produce an environment where they can come. And I had a table with a variety of these vaporizers from, you know, the Volatizer, the Aromed, the Vriptech, the Volcano. I think there was a couple of others on there that I might be forgetting. But just to be able to have people come in and test the units on their own was such a nice thing. We used a lot of other herbs, and it would be interesting to see. I've personally used herbs with bubble bags and extracted hashes or oil extracts with, you know, microencapsulated oils and trichome heads with the bubble bags using water and ice. And I just wonder if, you know, the popularity of vaporization clearly being fueled and passioned by the cannabis, both patient and recreational communities. I wonder if the herbs will finally ever break over and we'll start vaporizing these different herbs through all of these different units, you know, more than just trying it and never doing it again.
Well, in reality, all our devices are made for herbs that are legal use.
Yeah, well, I'm in Canada where federally it's legal to use cannabis, and soon we'll have a federally legal recreational system here. This year, we're supposed to get federally legal rec. So that changes the game. I think all of you guys should come up here and make some videos for your companies.
Let's do it.
Really legal.
I think more progressive formulation is going to be a big part of the future for sure, and devices that are able to adapt to the substances that you want to vaporize and a much broader spectrum of terpenes, flavonoids, and various active constituents. Be able to adapt to the user's preferences or perhaps the extraction artists, as they like to be called, preferences too. In other words, being able to adapt the device to deliver, you know, how much of the oil to the organoleptic experience, the throat and mouthfeel, the flavor, and how much of it to the pharmacokinetics, the deep tissue, smaller particle delivery. And you know, to be able to tune that either in a way that's fixed, you know, by the manufacturer, they can say this is what I think is right, or to the user's preference, and perhaps even be able to adapt to the user's preference by artificial intelligence or machine learning and looking at the way they're dialing and tuning their device and the types of rips they're taking.
Well, Mark, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was actually going to state that what you're saying is there's a lot more to go from my understanding of what the vaporizers can achieve, because we've hardly started scratching the surface, because at this moment we don't fully understand the cannabis plant itself. Once we understand what cannabinoids and how terpenes affect THCA and all the other different compounds, is where we can actually start designing vaporizers that might be maybe a 3-phase unit, where it starts at certain temperatures, goes up and down and back, you know, sideways, whichever way you want it to design the unit. But what I'm saying is, until we finally understand the plant itself, we literally cannot design a unit that is perfect. Does that make sense? Or does it only make sense in my mind?
No, it's a very complicated process. I mean, this is why the pharmaceutical companies have been fearful of cannabis for so long. It's why it's a tough subject for the regulatory agencies that are used to reductionist Western science. Absolutely. One thing, though, that is very clear, and that is that just like growing in the natural sun as opposed to growing under artificial light, we know that with vaporizing, we are creating very sophisticated spectrums. You know, major cannabinoids become minor cannabinoids, terpene expression based upon thermal gradients, the cannabimimetic effects. I mean, yeah, it's no one has this understood black and white to gospel, but we do know it's more sophisticated than how many people make it out to be. I think that's where I think really it's going to come into. Linus hit on this earlier, you know, in my opinion, the superiority of the human sensor. You can have all these complicated sensors, but at the end of the day, you know, from my experience, if it tasted really good and it felt really good, it worked really good. If it didn't taste really good and it didn't feel really good, it didn't work so well.
And that is scientific. Eventually,
but
a doctor might be like, what? No, it's some number.
But you got to understand, every person's chemistry is different. So that's why we have people that like the Vapor Brothers, that use the Vapor Brothers, and we have people that use the VREP, Vriptech, and we have people that use, you know, the VapeXhale. It just a preference where one unit might not work for everybody, where there's different units out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think as Bubbleman said, also, I own all of these vaporizers, so I use them all differently at different times depending on the use case and my mood and what type of user experience I want. So I would say it even gets more granular than that, in that, you know, just depending on your circumstance, you know, you will utilize different devices. I mean, you know, obviously mine is a plug-in. Portable devices have advantages there. And then although both Mark and I have all glass air pads, you know, I do find there is a distinct kind of resonance to his device that is missing in mine. And, you know, there are times when I will utilize his device instead of mine, and it all depends on my preference at the time. But I think the great news is we all have the option to have all these various options.
Yeah, I've gotten.
Well, it was like Linus. Go ahead, Mark.
People asking exactly, you know, what do you think is best? And I say, what's best is what is best for you at that point in time. You know, it's your ritual, your session. What's the best fit?
Well, it goes back to what Linus said earlier, and he was like, oh, I don't know if it's an American thing, but we always like, we're over this way or over that way. It's always one thing or the other. And I think it's said to be for North America, because Canadians have it in them as well. I've been fighting it for the last 10 years, and it's why I'm much more into having a quiver than thinking that one thing is better, like a one-shot wonder, just one arrow for every shot I take. I want to fit as many arrows in my quiver as possible, regardless of whether it's in regards to hitting off of a surface on an electric nail, from titanium to quartz to sapphire to silicon carbide, all these different surfaces. I like them because they preserve the terpene profile differently when I hit a dab off each and every one of them at the exact same temperature. So I know something's going on. My bioassay is pretty tuned for cannabis. I would say the way Mark was mentioning earlier, and Linus saying that is science. You know, I remember running mint through my bags the first time back in '99 or 2000, putting a little bit of the mint into a bowl and puffing it. Interesting. And then I put a bunch of bubble hash and a bunch of mint into a bowl, and I puffed that, and I blew it out, and I was like, wow, like I didn't cough at all. And so I punched into Google mint cough, and I came up with this like multi-million-dollar study that like Philip Morris did on designing the mentholated cigarette. They spent like $12 million to come up with the fact that mint is a good thing to add into cigarettes to suppress cough. I did it in like 40 minutes with like a bong, some matches, and a set of bubble bags and a little bit of mint. So there is value in these bioassays, whether we're doing them as experiments in front of us or whether we're inhaling into our lungs to taste these different profiles. Yeah, it's all about the quiver. That's why I'm so happy to see all of you guys in this room. Go ahead, Taz.
It's the same thing with you know, foods and beverages. You know, like some people don't like Coke out of a can, but they love it out of a glass bottle. Some people don't like their food cooked on certain materials, or certain materials may cook more evenly and more better. Sometimes you just, you know, where I find inspiration sometimes is from spots like that, when seeing how something cooks, or seeing how, I mean, even our newest product, shameless plug here on our new product, we just put out a new quartz banger called the Gavel, and we've got a textured surface on the bottom which favors the creation of nucleation sites, which helps facilitate vaporization at exceedingly lower temperatures, and kind of learned that from just, you know, watching beer glasses and beer glasses that are designed to have, you know, etched bottoms to help facilitate the carbonation separation from the beer.
Interesting how a simple process like adding that texture to the bottom of the Gavel, it reminded me when you said it of Indra talking about his hydrocarbon extraction machine, his extractor, and how by putting these little divots inside his chamber, when he puts, because he doesn't have a column like most of these products are made. Mainly gas goes in and it starts channeling and creating highways, and it doesn't touch all the material. Well, he drilled all these holes into the inside of his chamber, and so when the gas goes in, it hits these walls and it causes cavitation, which sends bubbles back into the material and moves all the material fully 100% of the time consistently. And that really reminded me of what you simply did with your quartz banger. That's fucking awesome.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Well, I'm feeling pretty good about this vaporization conversation. We're 2 hours in. Where should we lead this convo?
Right now, I'll throw in a topic. Has anybody ever worked with fractional vaporization?
And define it.
Well, a couple of years ago, we were we used actual fractional vaporization is just a term that we made with the Hercules, because using herb and oil at the same time, but using the oil to heat up the herb to vaporize. Does that make sense? First, you would heat up the oil.
So the heat created by the oil would then heat up the flower?
The herb, the flower, where you would actually heat up the oil to vaporize. As the vapor is passing through the herb gets slowly heated up and vaporized, which would add cannabinoids or other terpenes that are not in the oil itself. Does that make sense?
That sounds like the perfect temperature for the oil and the herb. The herb likes a little less temperature. Sometimes the oil, you need more temperature to get that fast.
See, that's the thing. Well, like I said, has anybody ever experienced something like that or worked with something like that?
We use oil and herb together in a device that predated our dab device. You just dab onto a ceramic surface inside. But we had before this came out, we had it in the vaporizer, in our normal vaporizer. We had a way into the top directly down to the heater, which was the right temperature we wanted the oil to be at. And then when you connected the herb, you created oil vapor and passed it through the herb. The hard part was getting both to just the right temperature that they should be at. The oil at just the right heater temperature we wanted. It dropped right down right onto the heater surface in there. And the herb to be. But when you got both, though, that was the best. That was the best I've ever experienced.
So you guys have tried. How about you, Mark? Have you tried anything like that with the Vriptech or?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, back in the day, put a whole bunch of patties of bubble hash on top of fresh packed flour and melted it all together, and enjoyed that evolved.
No, I understand about the patty part, but have you separated where you actually would vaporize the oil first, then use the oil vapor from the oil to vaporize the herb?
Well, I mean, there was the separation in another glass screen. We have experimented with that. So it's kind of like you got your flour on top of a glass screen and another glass screen on top of that with your concentrate. Eventually they do sort of meld together, but you are technically vaporizing the concentrate first, I guess. It's a little messy, but it can be fun and tasty.
Oh, messy, I know that part. What happened, Linus?
Go ahead, Len.
It sounds like they should be really close. But, I mean, Gary, do you mean, like, are they physically separated by a distance, or is it almost similar to putting wax right on top of your herb?
Well, we experienced it with the Hercules, where we would load up the Hercules first, and right on top of the ceramic rod, we would put a metal screen, and on top of the metal screen, we would put the herb. Where the oil is saturated right next to the oil sits right next to the ceramic rod where it gets vaporized, and that vapor itself gets pulled through the herb, which warms up the herb itself. Then after when the oil is done, it becomes a convection. I would say hybrid convection conduction for the herb itself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you get a different, subjectively better effect when you experience this?
Well, like I said, with my previous statement, where we don't understand the herb, the plant itself 100%, where we don't understand what each compound how each compound affects the other next compound. To me, it basically, if you, let's say, if you have OG oil and you have an OG Kush in there, you get the taste of the oil, but what happens is after that, when the herb kicks in, it just intensifies it for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
because of the compound, because of the more compounds that are found in the plant that's not in the oil, it actually intensifies the high. It intensifies the effects that the oil brings initially sets in.
It's a more sophisticated spectrum that you're extracting and delivering. I mean, this goes and kind of speaks to, you know, some of the research that was put out in 2014 by the Israelis, and, you know, a lot of us old-time cultivators have said forever that, you know, this is why sun-grown cannabis is a superior therapeutic agent, because you have more of the minor cannabinoids, you have more terpenes, more sophisticated profiles. It's just like, you know, this is the wine and weed, right? You know, comparison. Do you want, you know, more flavor, sophistication, and more layers there, or less? And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Gary. You also hit on a little nugget there about kind of a thermal equilibrium. You know, there's a lot of talk in vaporization about the superiority of convection over conduction. From my experience and the way that we vaporize, I've always found that really the magic is when you reach that thermal equilibrium. The important thing from my experience has been the materials. So in other words, if your materials are glass or quartz, especially, and your convective airflow heats those materials up to where they reach that thermal equilibrium, that's where I find you get the best, most rapid full spectrum extractions, enabling the most rapid full spectrum deliveries.
Interesting.
Well, I want to speak to that, and it's something that has very much to do what you just mentioned, Gary. Although we never used the oil itself to vaporize the herb, when Surf Rat Glass, Brian came up with his brother with that the wand that Mark has now innovated on and continues to push. They just weren't really producing it like a product, but it was the OG hot glass, like a little handle with this hot glass that you held into a bowl. And so we would put some Rene herb in there. And at one point, I was hitting a lot of full melt Rene bubble hash, and on a screen, but I would kind of use a match so it was just bubbling and never really completely burning. And I always wanted to combine the two. And so I asked Brian if he could make something that would combine the two. And he came up with this pipe that was basically two pipes melted together. And they were separate all the way up to the mouthpiece, where the two bong stems would spin and create one mouthpiece just at the top. So you would inhale one side the vapor from the herb, and on the other side I would put a little full melt, like 73 micron Rene bubble hash, and I would hit that with the match. So I would see the smoke kind of go up, but it was really more like a vapor smoke. It wasn't a harsh burnt smoke, you know, like almost like a dab prior to dabbing. And then the vapor would go up, and when those two joined right at your mouth, I swear to God, you could taste their separations in your mouth. Like they were joining in your mouth. And to me, to this day, that is pretty much one of the most incredible rips I've ever had. So if anyone wants to come up with a pipe that is a dab rig, but also fits one of the V-Rip hot glass wands, that you should do that, because people don't know. I'm telling you, that was like 12 years ago, and people do not know.
And that's
like an email on the side?
What's that,
an
Linus?
email on the side?
Yeah, I think it would be some type of an e-nail for dabs. You know, it could be this type of unit as well. Like, you just how to make it so you could do both at once. Where you
Marcus, have you tried dabbing off a silicon nitride?
Not unless you've sent me one.
Well, take a look at what Linus has. I've been following this product for 2.5 years, man. It's a different it's a different ballpark when it comes to dabbing. Linus, show him the VB 2.5.
Oh, the 2.5.
Yeah,
that's this.
I was going to say I have the Omicron for sure.
But this is a silicon nitride right there.
Yeah, that's what it, you know. I was looking at this silicon carbide, your unit.
Yeah,
which that's really nice, by the way. But this thing, we put silicon nitride in there because it was the ceramic surface that could get extremely hot very fast and not break. Because ceramic and glass at really high temperatures, if there's a big thermal gradient, like the edges are very cold because they're being held and the middle's very hot because that's the heating element, that just rips ceramic apart. So silicon nitride, it comes from kind of the industry, the heating elements that that light the gas on fire in your oven. It's a heating element, ceramic, that gets red hot in a few seconds and lights the gas on fire. We use the same material because it's ceramic, and we only want to dab on ceramic at the moment. That's our. I mean, it's kind of the easy way to ensure the taste will be great. But yeah, this unit gets up to 800 degree maximum in 30 seconds. So right here, while I'm holding it, it's going to tell me it's ready. And the vapor is really good because it's a slightly textured surface, and I don't know if that's doing what our email for. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Email task.
Task, yeah.
Task was talking about, maybe on a tiny scale, the roughness in the surface of the silicon nitride. It does seem to vaporize quicker. We're running quite high temperatures in here, and that's a whole thing on itself. Kind of so hot that the material doesn't actually, the dabs don't actually touch the surface. They bounce and evaporate in the air, and you get the entire hit within a second. This is a very quick way to vaporize, even if it's a tiny little dot of dabs. It'll go completely and evaporate. But yeah, the silicon nitride is very interesting.
I was going to say, you can't be dabbing that with the lid off if it vaporizes in less than a second. You must have put it right through the hole in the middle there.
Yeah, it keeps it mostly contained. Our first models really kept the vapor contained because I'm big into not letting it go into big spaces, and learning from the dabbing guys, because when we made this, e-nails were coming out with those domes, and those, even with the domeless nails, they're keeping the dab smoke within a very small area. This is actually quite big, but when this started, we were still doing bubble hash and actual hash, and it was the right volume to keep the vapor contained. But this hole is where you dab through, and it's the intake. Does double duty in that way.
See, the only reason I brought up the VB 2.5, Marcus, as you're telling me, as you're saying, the future of vaporization. See, with what they're doing, it's something different. They're doing silicon nitride. We've done silicon carbide, and what the industry standard is right now, quartz. And before quartz, it was the high ceramics, and before that, it was the titaniums, and before that, it was the hot knives, and before that, it was stones. So right now, we haven't gone through the full spectrum of materials available. What we can actually do. So right now, what the industry is looking at is quartz, but I think we have a long way to go before we can actually make the perfect vaporizer, whether it is a nail, whether it's an e-nail, whether it's a handheld, portable, desktop, or whatever. There's a long way to go before we even come to the perfect vaporizer.
I think that quartz is going to be the preferred material for a long time, and let me tell you why. I think that glass has always, been the ideal thing for the consumer. They started with metal pipes, they moved to glass pipes. You see a noticeable difference moving from a metal pipe to a glass pipe. And then, it's just kind of the same thing happening through the dabbing culture now, but now you found a material of glass, the quartz, that can withstand the thermal shock that the process dabbing undergoes. And so you get that glass flavor, and it's a hard material to beat. The reason why it's not kind of favorable to these vaporization electronic production scenarios is because it's just got such a low or such a different thermal expansion rate than all these other materials. So you try and put it with something like a heating element, or like even consumers will wrap an e-nail coil around a banger to try and make a quartz e-nail banger, but it'll end up breaking their banger because the coil expands and then it shifts a little bit while they're using it, and it's not on the same way. And then when it cools down, it's now pinching the glass and it breaks it. And so quartz is not a very friendly material to manufacture with when you're trying to turn it into a heating element. But all that being said, you know, with the community where it's at right now, I don't think that these other materials might be great and they might be suitable, but I don't see any of them surpassing quartz. And we were talking about silicon nitride. You know, I have concerns about silicon nitride. I mean, I guess it depends on the application that it's going to be used in. But I mean, even on the Wikipedia page that I pulled up right here, it says main hazards: when heated decomposition, silicon nitride may emit toxic fumes of ammonia and ozone. Contact with acids may generate flammable hydrogen gas. So we got to kind of be careful of which materials we're touting as being superior. I mean, if someone's making a nail out of this and someone comes along and hits it with a hydrogen torch, or even a MAP gas torch, or even if a glass blower decides they're going to use their glass blowing torch to heat it up, you're going to have a product issue. And so
I usually feel comfortable if we're just a fraction of that. The decomposition temperature, did they name what it was? How many degrees?
Right here it says that it says that the melting point is 1900 Celsius, which is extremely hot. But that is probably not taking into consideration that the stuff that's going to be going onto it. Like if you're burning contaminants on the surface, that could make it decompose at exceedingly lower temperatures. So
that's interesting. I think quartz is a perfect material. The silicon carbide that Gary's using in the UpTech, I see as necessary because it's a very porous and bumpy material. And the whole point of these little dab pens is to kind of suck the oil up into the coil by wicking. And oil will wick up a surface that is rough really easily and fast, and that will keep the coil nice and moist, and then the coil won't get hot. When we threw quartz into the bottom, and Gary has done it too, and a lot of people swear by it, when you put quartz as the core of the heating element, well, it's slick and it doesn't wick the oil so much. And actually not at all. You have to, often with a quartz pipe, you have to like do this to it to get the oil to actually flow onto the heater. I get what I think is a harsh, sharp, overheated hit, and I believe it's because quartz on its own can't be a wick so as much as silicon carbide can. But I think that I think we should all test this, especially if we helped each other. We should pay for the testing for a lot of these materials directly and come up with what could be a meaningful test. But all of us are pretty much in the safe zone when we're at just a fraction, like a third of the temperature needed to like break the material down or melt it, or to even make it move, or to make it short life. With Gary, I know with UpTech, he's concerned about these things lasting for a long time. So it kind of goes hand in hand that when you make a product and you figure out how to make it last a long time, that's usually figuring out how to make it not break down even a little bit during normal use, or even a lot of use. These things should be made for heavy dabbers to use them forever, and they shouldn't fail on them, or else we keep working on it.
Let me clarify. I was definitely kind of speaking about materials that are going to be hit with an open flame.
Oh wow, yeah.
Because that's kind of where my product specialty is right now, as we've moved away from electronic assemblies and things of that nature. We're kind of more of a material science focus on that over here now, between the materials, and quartz is our main thing now. So
cool, you're talking about flame, because I'd see you as an electronics guy. But it's funny because we've been playing around with flame because it's kind of new to us, because we've been around electronics so much, and sometimes it's fun to hear the sound of a torch. I mean, the point of your email and all of our products is you can't hear vaporizing happening in the next room, and that's kind of nice sometimes when you don't want the whole house to know about it.
Well, Task,
there are composites of these materials, guys. You know, I think the future will hold the development of the materials to where we find that there truly are best of all worlds. If anyone's dove into the technical ceramic space, they're doing all kinds of crazy things. I mean, combining quartz dust with various ceramic components, you're creating quartz ceramics. There are absolutely happy and middle ground that I think we will get to. Just a matter of pushing the material science.
No, I understand about that, Mark. But what Task was talking about, and I think where we got the mix-up is Task was talking about an open flame where you got to heat it up to a high temperature. Then when it that could break it down. But what Linus and the Vaporbrothers are doing with that silicon nitride is it's a controlled temperature where it doesn't reach 2,000 degrees Celsius. There is no way. And what he explained was. And that's the thing I love about the VB 2.5 is it doesn't vaporize on the heating element. It vaporizes like maybe what was it, a half a millimeter you said above it, right in the air?
That's my theory. I mean, this is the heating element, but that helps us to not have such a hot heating element. If you separate the heating element in space between the heat element and what you're vaporizing, you have to deal with a very high temperature. That's like what Task was talking about with you need a really good heater to heat an e-nail because there's a little distance. It needs to run at a very high temperature so that the e-nail can run at the temperature you want. But as you mentioned, it's a fraction of a millimeter, the distance between the heating surface and the dabs. So so that's a very small distance, but at least the dabs aren't settling down into the heater and settling down into the material and then turning black and smoking. They're evaporating theoretically in the air right above. It's the same effect as when you turn a skillet on your oven up so high that when you throw water in it, it bounces because it's being held up by its own evaporating, by its own vapor. And that effect, they call it the Leidenfrost effect. They need a more catchy name for that, by the way. The Leidenfrost effect is what we were going for with this device.
See, that's what I was trying to say is there's right now the industry is set on quartz. We don't know what the industry is going to be set on 5 years from now. It's just it's fluidic right now because we don't have the perfect answer to any of this.
Because nobody controls how it happens. It just people like what they like, and whatever blows up because that's what people like. And you hope that what they like is actually the thing that is actually, better for them, more along the lines of preserving terpene and cannabinoid profiles rather than absolutely destroying them.
Yeah, and
because more information. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I mean, I'm obviously a big believer in science and technology, and I love all the things that it's done for us, not just for the cannabis consumption side, but for everything in general. But, like my good old buddy Mark likes to tell me, whole foods are always better than eating EAS, Metrex, or any of those meal replacement protein shakes that I used to scarf down at his place all the time. And, sometimes I always think back, man, are we overcomplicating this? Because the plant in its natural form, sun grown, it's just so awesome. And I think Bubbleman said it best, if it feels good, if it feels right, then maybe that is the right way. And I don't want to get too much into hippy dippy territory, but it does feel that way. Like as I started making all these technical improvements to our device, and then I just thought about, the first vaporizer I used, the heat gun. And I really thought, man, the heat gun, I haven't used it for 10 years, but I do feel like if I used it right now, I think it would be comparable to a lot of the units out on the market still. So I think there is maybe going back to basics, and it does seem like the world is kind of going back to basics again, and maybe that is the best way to ingest the cannabinoids. And I hate to eat and run, or not eat and run, but it's time for me to take my kids to go eat, so I have to go run now. And I appreciate being on the show, Marcus, Task, Mark. Gary, Linus, thank you very much for all of your contributions to the cannabis world. I really feel it is important to give credit where credit is due, and all of you guys have influenced me in one way or another, and I'm glad that I was able to do the same. So thank you guys, and well, I'll continue watching on my cell phone while you guys continue educating me.
Awesome. I appreciate you being here.
Have a good one, man.
Take care, Seibo.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Always good to have Seibo in the house and sharing his passion. He's just one of those guys that he's ignited with it. You know, he's definitely not going to
stop. He has a quartz thing for his vaporizer now.
Yeah, I've been hitting it the whole time. He has these little quartz rods that you fill your concentrate with, and then you just slide it right into the tube of the piece. The bong goes right over top. But yeah, these little quartz rods give. I mean, they dab deliciously. Well, the one thing I'll tell you about this, which is crazy, I'll tell you one thing about this. When I put like a drop of pure cannabis-derived terpenes into this thing with nothing else,
right,
and turn the unit down and drop the quartz rod into the glass tube that's been heating the air up, just the way it seems to heat is one of the most preserved pure terpene rips I've ever taken. And I've done like 20, 30 in a row, like done some gauntlets with it. It's actually astounding how much it preserves the rip. It definitely hits Seibo.
Ultimately efficient, really, really efficient.
I need to get one.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, I have both my electric nail. I got a Mr. Hotbox going right now, and I've got my VapeXhale going. I usually have like 2 or 3 different things going that I can rip at a time, just because I love a little bit of variety in my life.
Do you use torch at all, or are you completely?
I use torch. I have a torch right here.
It's not show friendly.
No, it's, you know what, I have used it during the show. In fact, for a while there, I have a Dabinator, I have a D-Nail, a Mr. Hotbox. They're all just sitting here. I use them at different times, but for a while, like maybe a month or 2, I was just torching. I got into torching. I came way late to the torch game, and I definitely am not a fan of like knocking it over and burning my car seat or burning my friend's arm or all the sort of like like the torch etiquette that is the not. Yeah, exactly, dude. Fuck. I know. And those burns, we were talking about it the other day with a friend. The burns that you get on the inside of your arm, they look like you're a meth junkie or something, and they never go away. They just are there for like years.
But they don't hurt. They don't hurt, right? When it's hot enough, you can't feel it.
Mm. Yeah, I tried to fight the torch, you know, I tried to do the whole anal thing, but then the torch just came back full swing, man. Like, at least for me in my market, it did.
Yep, no, the torch is definitely popular. Like I said, I'm a quiver guy. I'm definitely not trying to be all like anti any particular one thing. I'll just, you know, I might not smoke BHO or CO2 oils, but at the same time, I don't make it my mission in life to make sure that nobody else does either. Maybe I was a little bit more like that when you met me, though. Hey, Mark?
Yeah. Impassioned.
But Marcus, do you time it? Do you set your timer, and you know you won't let anybody touch it unless it's gone the whatever?
Well, you know what? That's sort of really super noob shit. Eventually, you just know your nail, and you know how long to hit it for, and you know how long it cools. The wrist is quite. You know, you use your wrist to tell how hot it is can also really, for me, I'm avoiding one thing and one thing alone with the torch, chazzing my banger to burn and blacken my hit. And it also tastes like, ooh, like that's something completely different from the beautiful tasting rip I would have gotten had I just allowed it to stay in an oil. Like when it's still in an oil, I feel like I've vaporized it. And when it's chazzed my banger, and I need to get the DC glass cleaner out, then I feel that it's
then you gotta get on the timer. Like you say, it's super noob shit. Well, here's super noob number 1 right over here then. Just because it's like, you know, you know, waiting a minute for a banger to cool down is a long time to wait, and I get distracted. You know, I check my phone, I see a notification, and sooner or later I've missed my window. So I've got a timer with a alarm. So it always goes off, and I always get it at the right time. And that's really kind of what it's about. It's more about a discipline than being a noob. No offense or anything, but
no, none taken. I was using it more like as a joke, but in reality, I don't heat up for that long. I don't have to cool my nail for a minute because I don't take monster dabs. I take many like smaller dabs. So when I put a dab on a nail, it's not cooling the nail down so much that I have to like heat it up real hot for a minute and bring it down, or heat it up for 20 seconds with the torch in order to bring it down. Also, I'm hitting these giant fucking, these things are big. These different, I got a bunch of these JP ones, and I got I think DC sent me a XXL. They're all the ones I have are big. So I become a noob instantly if I hit someone's small little banger. I need the timer immediately. Right. But with my own banger, I'm pretty good.
Well, and these new ones that we put out there, they're a little different too. The quartz material has a different thermal properties than traditional quartz. So, a 20-second heat up would result in about a 60-second cool down.
Yeah, that's generally what I see with some of these larger ones I have. Now I'm more like heat it for maybe 10 seconds. And just with my wrist, it's, not very long that I wait 25 seconds or something, close to 30 seconds. And then I'm have my little dab. And it definitely doesn't work as good as having your nail plugged in or having your timer and doing it exactly the same amount each time. But I just, it's all what you choose in the end.
For sure.
You guys believe in carb caps? Do you believe in tight carb caps and really pulling a vacuum?
I like the opportunity to have that. I got these Puke and Beagle ones that fit into quartz bowls, similar to the one Mr. Hotbox has. It fits very tight, and when I put my finger on the hole, there's no pulling through it anymore. I like the ability to have it so I can do that if I want it, but I definitely don't want to hit my whole rip like that every time.
I'll tell you, when we first put out our first carb cap back in, I think it was in 2012, might have been 2013. Again, I'm bad with dates. But I was under the impression that, the vacuum pressure played a substantial role in the carb cap. But as I've kind of moved along and grown to understand it better, I think that it's good to have a good seal so that your carb cap's functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning. Like, you don't want air to be coming around the sides where it's not supposed to be going. So a good seal is important, but I don't think that the vacuum pressure plays so much into the functionality of it as much as just having a constant flow of new air to mix into the oil and having the air thin the oil out. And by thinning the puddle out, it vaporizes easily because the depth of the puddle is less. And when you have a deeper puddle, it's under more surface pressure at the bottom, and it requires more energy to create nucleating or boiling. And so by thinning out the oil, it allows it to vaporize. At least that's where my personal understanding of it is at right now. And I may be wrong, but I don't think that the vacuum effect of the carb cap has too much to play in the functionality of it.
I wonder what Mark McCoy has a lot of deep understanding of certain physics here. Do you have an opinion on? Do you think that
I actually put quite a bit of effort into this last winter. Different sort of state of the art dabbing gear. Kind of came late to the game as well. I've played with torches. I think that there is something to be said about the thermal gradient in your timing, and that's one thing that you don't have with the e-nails at the present, although I think you may see some of that stuff in the future. And what I've found is it's kind of a combination. It's the vacuum and it's the cyclonic flow of some carb caps that, like Tass said, spreads it out. It's just like when we're vaporizing flowers, you want to grind them up so you have that surface area. You don't want to grind it up so fine so that it cakes together and interferes with the airflow, but you want to grind it up fine enough that you really are exposing your full bowl, all those particles, to that nice convective flow, and eventually that thermal equilibrium when it's reached in there. So I think it's a combination. It's both the vacuum and the air flow. And what I've found is the cyclonic flow that spins the oil around in there is the most effective in terms of being able to go to get a nice, fulfilling, thick, condensed vapor, but at the lowest temp possible. So you're minimizing the denaturalization of the important components. Really, really important with the terpenes. You know, the terpenes, hell, these are solvents. They're going to vaporize really quick. They're very volatile. And if you want that full spectrum, you want to be at the lowest temperature you can possibly be at. And I find the cyclonic vacuum is the way to do that. I got turned on to that actually as a pursuit because we have had some customers use our heat wands as cyclonic, heated cyclonic vacuum. And we're just blown away that they were dropping their heat wand as a carb cap down on a banger and able to go even lower temp because they're getting vacuum that's spinning the oil around that's already heated, because of course that vacuum is coming from the air spinning around the hot glass element of our wand. And so we've been playing with this. We've got a couple products in the R&D pipe that would allow people to go this route if they already had a wand, and also a carb cap design that would really help maximize this based upon the same flow form physics we have in our vaporization heat wand.
That's interesting. It reminds me, I had invited Enrico today from the Sublimator company. He also kind of is tuned into the Venturi effect. And he, you know, one of the things that I came up with why his thing is so ridiculous is because it does give just an insane, like it's a little, I don't mean ridiculous in a bad way. Like I thought it was one of the tastiest rips the first time I ever hit it. It was just kind of blew me away. Actually, I couldn't really believe it, because it just was such a big, crazy looking thing. And I was like, holy shit, I'm going to burn my house down with this thing. And he's like, no, it's good. Check it out. And I hit it and was immediately blown away. And then I started hitting it when I wasn't getting the hit. And what I was noticing was you can't take the heat wand and put it on the bowl and have a rip. His bowl was like this big, like titanium bowl that you needed to heat up with the wand. So it was the same idea when they were both heated up. And I spoke about this with the Hotbox guys recently, who have this is an electric nail vaporizer that you put the coil over top of here. It basically goes like that. And then they have a little heated pan here, a little screen that fits right into here, and it sits on your pipe. It screws into like the base electric nail. This thing actually fucking works really good. And I told him right away, I said, you know, if you keep this warm inside the thing before we hit it, I bet you it gives a way better rip. And he was like, oh yeah, we figured that out right away. So there's definitely something important to be said about that. Like when you're coming up with these designs, if you're an innovator listening to the guys on the panel right now and you're trying to come up with these unique designs, at least for vaporizing, that, you know, you can't just bring a component that's totally cold into the mix, or even on a smallest level, it really affects the temperature of the surface that you're dabbing off of or using to vape off of. And that in turn, you know, affects everything in the end, and you might just miss that magic. And I don't understand all of the things, you know, to the level that Task and Mark and the guys on the panel are talking about, but I definitely get a good idea, and I'm glad there's people that are this passionate about it, paying extra attention to those very subtle things to, you know, create the nuances that make a great product great.
You can't have a symphony with just the bass.
No, you can't.
Mark, a quick question. When you were talking about the Venturi effect and all that, have you ever come across the notion, well, have you ever thought about that the less oxygen produces more vapor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another component that's important to consider, the vacuum consideration. I mean, if you look at our water pipes, you know, we you know, back in the day when we started our company, water pipes and bongs were, you know, a bit controversial. In fact, still to this day, some of my family members will jokingly ask me if I still have that high-tech bong company. But if you...
That's funny, because people would say, oh, that's high tech.
My family asked me, am I still smoking? I'm like, no, I'm vaporizing. What the hell is that? No, just leave me alone. I need to work on something.
If you look at our vaporization water tool design, I used ice catches, not just because I like the option of running ice through the whole tube, but you know, it really reduces the air volume in there, so that once you're pulling that vapor through there, it's really minimized any oxidation, and so the vapor is more. It seems to be more active. It seems to be, you know, a racy sativa is a little more racier. A real heavy indica is a little less heavy. In fact, if it's late at night, you know, I'll often intentionally mix some air with the vapor I'm pulling off the tube, or even not run as much ice, because I want a little oxidation to create a heavier effect. So yeah, there's absolutely something to that, Gary.
Okay, yeah, because we came to that conclusion right when we were designing the Hercules, that we made the air path so tight that you had to mouth to lung it instead of going straight to lung. But the vapor production the vapor that it produced, compared to, let's say, a open coil design and the pens, where it was totally different. And about the Venturi effect that you're talking about, that does that does have a role in vaporization itself. It actually adds, how do I put this? It adds to the effect of how much vapor it creates, the quality of the vapor, and how fast it actually how fast it actually gets into a person's lung. Where how do I put this? I'm not the best articulate person. I can visualize it in my brain, but whatever you're doing and whatever you talked about is actually what needs to happen in vapor, what needs to be happening in portable vaporizers, and that's the direction I think we're going right now.
Yeah, it's a huge difference the flow form physics makes. I mean, to me, it's still kind of dumbfounding that open source math that's been around since the 17th century is largely ignored in this industry, or it's just accidental when it factors in. For me, you know, I studied medical aromatherapy long before I got into vaporizing cannabis, and I really felt the terpenes, the symphony, was ultimately going to be more of the magic, because cannabinoids would be sort of commercial commodities, and you can only create these sophisticated terpene profiles, you know, by growing the particular cultivar in the particular appellation, the particular vintage. And so I always wanted to preserve those, besides just sort of being a flavor snob, I guess, by nature. And so with cannabis, of course, those terpenes go at such a lower temperature than the cannabinoids. So if you want to have any chance at getting the full spectrum vapor, the cannabinoids and the terpenes in the same inhalations, like you do off those first couple pulls of a properly rolled cone, or a proper, you know, low temp, just wafting the wood match across the top of a V bowl bong rip, you really had to have a small sample size and find a way to extract fast and efficiently. And for me, it was, yeah, Bernoulli's principle and the Venturi effect, which, as I stated earlier, I was actually studying for a shower aromatherapy apparatus. And I woke up in the middle of the night and just realized, gas mechanics, fluid mechanics, same principles. That's the key to getting the best vape. And that was where the design concept came for our chamber bowl. Still working
with the Venturi effect, what we're trying to achieve, when we came to the conclusion that the Venturi effect was with it was called Cyclone Tech for us, when we tried to do the herb cartridge for the vaporizers, where you don't have to stir it anymore, because at that time in 2012, you had to literally stir the herbs inside the portable vaporizers, where we introduced, well, we didn't introduce it, we were working on the Cyclone Tech, where the air would circulate around in the herb itself before being before the vapor being extracted. Does that make sense? For some reason, I can't hear anybody.
Sorry about that, guys. I was muted. Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I think, you know, this is, you know, this is where you're splitting hairs, but it's these hairs being split that are the difference between a good vape and an exceptional vape.
Yeah, but too bad we weren't not able to perfect the technology. But it is something that needs to be looked at again, because, like you said, the Venturi effect. What actually people are doing with the carb caps right now is they're spinning it to create the Venturi effect inside the quartz bowl. So that's just coming to light. I don't know how long that's been being done, but I've begun to notice that where if you go back to, how do I put this? Basically, what we need to do in order to make the vaporizers, either whether it's a desktop or a portable, perfect, we have to look at the mathematics and what was discovered hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, if you look at the
That's
old
basically
hookahs,
what
you look at the old hookahs, you know, as the article that we started this discussion with, you know, sort of the first ancient vaporizer. They've got their charcoal holder that is larger than where you actually pack your cannabis or your tobacco or your hashish or whatever matrix you're vaporizing, and that air that's sucked past that charcoal is getting heated, and then it's being accelerated by Venturi through your substrate that you're actually looking to vaporize, or really in the case of hookahs, hybrid vapor smoking. And yeah, I mean, it's really nothing new. It's the same way nature works. If you look at the way waves are created in nature and wind gets funneled through the forest, it's I think that's, you know, for me, that was always where the inspiration came from, the physics of nature. But you're absolutely onto it. Love to huddle up. I'm fairly versed in the Venturi effect and Bernoulli's principle.
Let me ask a question real quick, because I'm trying to catch up to speed with you guys. I mean, I'm familiar with the Venturi effect, but I'm not familiar with how you're applying it in your devices. Are you putting your material like at the choke point before or after? Like, where are you putting it?
Well, in our device, we have a bowl that's literally below an intake that opens up wider. So your hot air that's your convective hot air source is being accelerated and condensed by Venturi.
Right.
So it's reaching its point of maximum velocity and maximum pressure right as it goes through your substrate. And for me, that was the magic, especially with raw herb. You know, you've got such a broad temperature range across which the terpenes and the cannabinoids release. If you want to be able to have terpenes and cannabinoids in the same inhalation, which I do, I prefer it that way, you really have to find a way to make your extraction as efficient as possible. And that's what the Venturi effect does for you.
Are you taking advantage of the low pressure that happens at that moment to draw it out of the herbs more?
Yeah.
So it's a noticeable difference in pressure.
Absolutely, big time. I mean, it's the flow form and the pressure, the vacuum.
We didn't take advantage of Venturi on purpose, at least in this, but we did definitely. This little ceramic injection molded piece is made a little bit asymmetrical. It's meant to create a spin if there wasn't a spin already. We found that air goes every which way super fast, though. All we wanted to make sure that the whole bowl vaporizes, not just the middle. But that's mostly what we were going through. But a real Venturi, I've only seen in your vaporizer so far.
Well, there's the Venturi pipes that I've seen. I think the handheld pipes. It's not a vaporizer, but the pipe itself creates the Venturi effect where it looks cool. I'm not sure, but I haven't tried it yet. But that's another one that's out there currently.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you a question real quick. You said that you believe that the vacuum comes into play, and I used to think the same thing too. So can you just elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially to put it into terms that you're probably going to be most familiar with. Again, as I said, last winter, when I sort of have more downtime for R&D and playing with things on the benchtop, I really said, hey, I'm gonna figure out this dabbing game and test, you know, all the different state-of-the-art devices. I played with a number of the different American-made coils. I found that my preference, I like just wrapping a coil around a glass or a quartz banger because of the simplicity. But like you said, there are quirks there for sure. At the end of the day, the carb cap was everything. It determined how low of a temp I could vaporize my rosin or my cryoethanolic. I could go literally to temperatures just above what I vaporize flowers at if I have a strong cyclonic vacuum. And so I'm both spinning the oil around in there, like you were touching on earlier, to maximize the surface area exposure to the heat, and I'm creating vacuum, which of course lowers the boiling point and the temperature at which the phase transition takes place.
Right. And obviously, you know, in order to create that vacuum, you have to create restrictions. So it's kind of like a give or take. You're going to have a really dragged hit then if you're getting that suction vacuum that you want, or you're going to have a nice, you know, kind of free flowing hit. So I guess it's just going to.
It's about the balance. I think, you know, so many people came from the bong ripping of flowers world, where the idea was, I want to snap it through so fast. I need the least amount of resistance. And you know, hey, I get it. I understand. That's what some people prefer. At the end of the day, for vaporizing, you actually want a paced draw anyway. So, you know, if you want the cleanest, fullest spectrum vapor, you want your medicine to go the farthest, the least amount of it being denatured and damaged in the process. You know, you have to find ways to make lower temp efficient and functional. And there is no lower way than, or no better way than vacuum and flow form.
To add on to that, I think that also regulating, you know, that like how I spoke of volume and depth, you know, regulating your puddle depth goes into play too. If someone's going to throw a gram into one of my bangers, it's not going to cook as efficiently if they would have loaded in 10 stages of 0.1.
Well, that's the beautiful thing, and I think that's why Bubble prefers doing the small taster dabs. I mean, especially if you have access to high quality materials to vaporize, you don't need to, as they say, waste it to taste it. I mean, you know, if you, I've got a rosin that I pressed out last year, virgin flower rosin, was 7.75% terps. I mean, I've seen guys with rosins as high as 9% terps. If you've got that kind of flavor, you don't need a half a gram in your bucket. It makes more sense to take little tasters and get that full symphony effect anyway. Take a whole bunch of them.
Do you know how much vacuum pressure has to be created to lower the boiling point just a single degree?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure what that metric is, but you could look it up on Google there. There's curves that give you an idea of where the boiling point goes based upon the pressure for every
Well, I know it's different with all materials. Like with water, it's going to be different than it will with oil. So I was just wondering if you knew by chance.
No, and then the terpene profile, of course, makes it unique and specific to every single material you're putting in there. So
we tried to measure pressures in different places for different reasons. We wanted the vaporizer to know if it was being drawn from and you know, adjust its temperature, whatever. And just ordinary pressure sensors could not tell that little difference at all. It's a small change.
The human sensor reigns supreme, you guys. I'm telling you, the human sensor reigns supreme.
Yeah.
Not in the automotive world, believe me.
I agree. I agree. In this particular world, though, I've seen the same thing, and I don't know if it's just a paying more attention or if there's something to be said for the olfactory of particular people who happen to be the innovators in these different aspects of industry that are just almost like the cannabis sommelier, where they're just their nose is smelling things a little bit deeper than someone who's just like, you know, I'm often amazed when someone pulls their bud out of a bag and it stinks like mold, and I'm like, ooh, and they'll be like, what? Those are terps, that's musk. I'm like, no, bro, that's like mold. Actually,
that's
mold.
not terroir.
I can see it. It's right there on the bud. It's just like, that's not terroir. Oh, so I think that there's something to be said for that bioassay, the importance of trying something for your own head and making those decisions, which I'm sure would be a good place to start task in regards to trying to figure out what vacuum works best just through the bioassay. I mean, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different carb caps here, and I use them all at different times. It depends on kind of what kind of a rip I'm looking for. Like if I'm looking for that high anxiety, like sitting on the edge of my chair, I'm on the brink of highness. Well, I'm going to use my really serious vacuum carb cap, the one that has like no airflow almost at all, and I'm just like, that seems to, when I exhale a heavy duty rip of the Where Is My Bike, longer flowering, clean, rich rosin, it just is quite different from if I'm looking to hit something a little lighter, like the Juanita, Lagrimosa, very orange flavory, you know, kind of like a dessert more than a heavy rip. I like to hit this one because it's so flavorful, and I don't have to turn the vacuum on full. I can just hit it really like boom, like a big blast. And I still, when I smoke this, hit anything else out of my pipe until I clean the pipe, because everything will taste.
Right. I think it just kind of boils down to personal preference with a lot of people as well. You know,
Always.
Some people are going to like one thing, others are going to like another. I personally, like I said, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I think the vacuum is less a part of it, and it's more just about having fresh air to mix in with the oil so that there's molecules available for your oil to, you know, interact with, and keeping that puddle not too deep. And I think that those are the biggest things for me. And having a cap that creates a suction, I end up feeling like I'm fighting the piece. So my personal preference is just having a cap that, you know, has a nice flow to it, but can also get the oil swashing around.
Yeah, I mean, I think
A happy middle ground.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Mark.
at the end of the day, it's about tuning into not just your preference, but you'll figure it out that each one of those caps, they create different vacuums, and so therefore you use a different temperature to get the results you want.
Absolutely. I definitely like having a quiver of caps.
We've got a new cap that we're gonna put out next Friday too, you guys. By the way, I wish I could show it to you right now, but I can't. A little collabo with Gordo Scientific, so
Gordo.
Yeah, stay on the lookout.
Nice.
Very cool. I'm sure you guys have seen the carb caps that people were actually putting terpenes into, that you were carbing with those.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that ever took off.
Very, very interesting though. And also the whole concept of just like having cool air before, you know, it's because it cools the air. You're cooling the air before it goes through. And there's also the Eternal Quartz guys came up with what they're calling their convection carb caps, where they're made out of quartz. So you'll heat the tip of the carb cap and get it nice and hot so that the air that you're drawing through is hot air, and it, you know, helps facilitate the vaporization process even further there.
Yeah, that's what some of our guys have been doing with the heat wand. That's what really got me looking at playing with the carb cap, and you know, being able, the idea of actually having not just vacuum and flow form component, but a thermal component to the carb cap. I think definitely something there.
It's all about the Trinity.
Yes,
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me, but I got to take off. I've got a family thing I got to get to, and I haven't even showered yet today. So
yeah, we're just going to wrap it up right now, Task. Thanks a ton for coming in and chatting with us, and we'll look forward to, if you want to drop like a website and an Instagram or something where people can check you out, that's always helpful.
For sure. Highlyeducatedti.com for our online store. My Instagram is TaskRock, TaskRok. I hardly ever post those, so don't get too excited. And the Instagram for Highly Educated is just HighlyEducatedTi.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for coming out. Linus from Vaporbrothers, thanks for joining the conversation and keeping it psychedelic, bro. I really appreciated your perspective. And I'm sorry to hear that your partner split because you went corporate. Corporate's just a word. It's not a mindset.
Yeah. It's an organization.
That's
you get more done. When there's responsibility and a lot of parts, yeah, you can't wing it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming in. And Gary from UpTech and W9, who helped organize the show. Thanks, bro, for being a part of the show. If you want to, actually, Linus, real quick, do you want to drop your Instagram and your website as well?
Sure. We're Vaporbrothers.com. We sell the vaporizer there. We had the VB2 for a while, but we might bring it back. Gary seems very hip to it, too. That's interesting. And Instagram is at Vaporbrothers, spelled out VAPOR Brothers. And that's good. I'm also Linus Larson on Facebook. You can search for Vaporbrothers on Facebook, and then I post on there and find me that way. It's a good way to message.
Awesome,
I love to answer any questions. And you know what? Sorry, one more. It's not a plug. It's a website that we all have been on at one point. It's called fuckcombustion.com. If you want to be a manufacturer and hear people say, what about this material? What about that? Oh, I took a hit and it felt burnt. All the things, all the hard questions, all the arguments, the people are very discerning on that website, fuckcombustion.com. I'm on there as Linus, Vaporbrothers. You can search. And if you want to ask the hard questions, that's the forum to do it on. You won't be like rushed off because it's not, you know, polite or something. Although I'm forced to be polite back to everybody, and I'm not supposed to say anything bad about any other company. But that keeps it clean. It's one good place to find me.
Awesome, very cool. Fuck combustion, absolutely. Gary from UpTech and W9, give thanks for helping me put on the show. Do you want to drop your Instagram and your contact information?
I appreciate you having me on the show. I really appreciate the members on the panel where they've given me a lot of insight. Mark, Linus, Task, Seibo. I appreciate you guys coming on. Instagram is UpTech. That's our manufacturer's Instagram. Then we have W9Tech, our retailer's Instagram. Our website is w9tech.com. That's the letter W, the number 9, tech.com. That's where you can find our vaporizers at. I want to point out that last week I did meet up with Linus, the Omicron that he has. So we had to refurbish his old Omicron. He had the Omicron V3. We had to give him the V5. He's been 2 generations out. And I am going to be receiving one of the VB 2.5s to test out because, like he said, we might bring it to market. We might be working together on that project itself. So thank you, everybody, for coming on. And thank you, Marcus, for having us on. And if you have any questions, I'm on Fuck Combustion too. As Linus said, if you can pass Fuck Combustion's questions, your company is doing all right. You're doing okay.
Yeah. And yeah, Gary's very precocious. What's the word for it? Prolific. He's very prolific on it, and has answered all the most tough. And he has a lot of heart in it. And when he says, "Don't inhale off of this, that, and that," and we don't do that, by the way, he means it. He's really for portables, and I think the world is really going portable too. Maybe Gary has the good chance at taking a lot of what we've talked about today and reproducing it in a portable way. Because for a long time, all these years, I bank on plug-in models, because I get the hit I want. Reproducing that into a portable, well, oil made that easy and possible, but vapor someday would be cool if there was a good herb vaporizer that was portable. Maybe that's subject of future shows and conversations.
Absolutely. Well, I also want to thank Mark McCoy for coming out and sharing his knowledge. It's always great to hear from you, dude, and see you, man. Even my wife walked into the room at one point to bring me a lovely water, which I have not even had a sip of. And you were on the screen. You were on the screen, and she said, "Does he not age?"
She's too kind. He
looks exactly the same. Yeah, dude. So thank you so much for coming out, dude.
Many good memories, man. I'm gonna get the family up there and we'll hang out here at some point in the not too distant future. Thanks for putting this on, man. Awesome platform, Bubble. Can't thank you enough for the exposure. I think this is a great subject. I think it's really good for people, the vapor enthusiasts, enthusiasts of anything, to understand the history of what it is they're enthusiastic about, how they got to where they are today, and the ability to add feedback to help guys like us, drive the future. Linus, we've known each other for a long time. Always a pleasure. Seibo, definitely one of my favorite humans in the world. Gary, great to meet you. Marcus recently made me sort of aware of you guys and what you've been doing. We'll have to collaborate on something. Hell, our companies are only 3 letters apart.
Hey, Mark, quick question. I gotta ask you, are you in Canada as well?
No, I'm not. I'm in California. I'm here in the top of Cruz. Super lucky to have been able to cultivate here in what I consider one of the Champagne regions of the world for cannabis and for grapes, for that matter. And I
do apologize. You got cut off. You're in NorCal, right?
Yeah, I'm in NorCal, Santa Cruz.
Okay, perfect. I used to make my trip up there for the annual pickup. Yeah, we really need to sit down, because I wanna pick your brain about some of the research you've done on the Venturi effect and collaborating on something that we think should be the ultimate portable device that should come out.
Yeah, let's session, bro. I look forward to it.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much, everybody.
Awesome, guys. I also want to thank Seibo for coming out with the Team VapeXhale. You can check him out on Instagram at Team VapeXhale. I'm Bubbleman. You can check me out right here on YouTube on Bubbleman's World and BC Bubbleman on Instagram. And yeah, just super, super thankful to have these guys come in and share their information today. Thank you all for watching. We had about 700 live viewers. It's just down to 580 now at the end of the 3 hours. That's pretty awesome. And hopefully this show will get a solid 10,000 views in the next 7 days, like the last 3 episodes of Hash Church 2.0. I will be in Jamaica next week for Bob Marley's birthday bash at 56 Hope Road in Kingston, Jamaica. And I'll be hanging out and having a good time with Skunkman Sam for a while on the other side of the island. So hopefully we'll see you guys next week on Hash Church. And thanks everyone for being a part of it. May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. Peace out, everybody.